Tatsuya heard his name being called and turned toward the voice. A group invited him to join them, making the situation suddenly feel overwhelming. Surrounded by unfamiliar faces, Tatsuya could only stare in confusion as the invitation closed in around him. He tried to steady himself and thought that maybe, somehow, he could get used to this. Tatsuya introduced himself as Hiroyama Tatsuya, a 29-year-old office worker, while an elderly king welcomed him. That was how he realized he had been pulled into one of those otherworld hero scenarios as the legendary hero. He recalled that he had simply been out hiking when a magic circle suddenly appeared beneath him and dropped him into this place. Looking around at the others who had arrived with him, Tatsuya saw they were just as confused and were asking where they were. The king explained that this was the kingdom of Iris, and admitted the nation was on the verge of collapse because powerful demons appear every 100 years and devastate towns and countries. Since the kingdom's knights and adventurers were not strong enough to stop the demons, they had resorted to summoning heroes in desperation. An attendant handed Tatsuya a skill plate and explained that it would reveal his abilities and attributes. As the others checked theirs, one person excitedly announced a lightning-based hero skill, while another praised the exceptional talents of heroes summoned from Earth. More results were called out one after another, but the grand skill names sounded so exaggerated that Tatsuya felt they were almost too convenient to be real. A noisy man asked Tatsuya what kind of skills he had received, and Tatsuya curtly told him not to call him old since he was only a little older. When Tatsuya finally looked at his own plate, the first thing he saw was an ability called Crop Cultivator. The mood around him instantly shifted as the others repeated the name in disbelief and then noticed another ability related to farm tool maintenance. Staring at the plate in confusion, Tatsuya realized that aside from Crop Cultivator, the rest of the skill names were written in strange, unreadable terms. The others burst into laughter and mocked him, joking that he had ended up as some kind of farmer instead of a hero. Tatsuya could only glare back in frustration as the ridicule continued around him. Before the situation could get any worse, Tatsuya raised his voice toward the king and demanded to know why he alone had been given such strange skills. An old attendant announced that Tatsuya would be sent to the imperial capital that very day, where he was expected to train and prepare for the coming demon invasion, and Tatsuya bitterly realized he had apparently received some kind of ignore skill. Their route then led them into a place known as the Lost Forest. The group was told that passing through this huge forest on foot would cut the trip to the imperial capital down to half a day, and thanks to a clergyman's protective charm, the dangerous monster-filled area felt like an ordinary hike. As they walked, one girl happily said the charm was amazing because the forest did not feel threatening at all. Another member of the group snapped at Mako to stop walking so slowly, and Mako fired back in irritation. A blonde companion explained that the charm's effect would only last around an hour, so Mako needed to hurry. Walking behind the others, Tatsuya concluded that they disliked him, though he also understood that he was the odd one out since the rest of them already knew each other and he was not truly part of their group. Up ahead, some of them quietly complained that the so-called farmer was nothing but extra weight, while Tatsuya could only wonder if that was really how they saw him. The blonde boy then reminded everyone that this was not a game, pointing out that even a minor scratch from a branch had drawn blood and proved they could genuinely die out there. One girl recalled that the king had admitted many people previously summoned from Earth had died after failing their missions, and she asked Miyamoto what they should do now. One girl nervously pointed out that after training they were supposed to search for equipment, but with abilities like these, the hero would already have a huge advantage. Then someone called for everyone to listen, and bluntly said there was no point in sharing money or equipment with what he called that deadweight farm boy. In a clearing, the group gathered around their campsite as one person suddenly collapsed to the ground. A girl hesitated and asked if they were really going through with this, while the others continued preparing to abandon Tatsuya. She was abruptly silenced as one of the boys coldly said Tatsuya did not even have a class, and once the charm wore off, the monsters would finish him off. Pressured by the others, the girl weakly protested that she did not want to do it, but they argued that keeping Tatsuya with them would only lower their chances of survival. In the end, she tearfully gave in, saying he should be grateful they had not killed him, and quietly apologized to the farmer boy. When he came to, Tatsuya found himself alone in the forest beside the extinguished campfire, with only the abandoned campsite around him. Realizing they had truly left him behind, Tatsuya exploded in anger and swore revenge on the people who had betrayed him. But after that first burst of rage, he forced himself to calm down and decided his first step was to check what he actually had with him. Tatsuya checked the supplies left with him and found only a few basics, including a plate, a pot, a lighter, a knife, a water bottle, a flask, a phone, and a sleeping bag. Looking over the rest, he saw curry powder, salt and pepper, bread, and chocolate, then realized it was little more than the kind of gear someone might bring on a mountain trip, while the others had taken the money and most of the food and water given by the king. Standing alone, Tatsuya looked out over the vast forest and understood that he had been abandoned in an unfamiliar place filled with dangerous monsters. He noticed a cave nearby and decided that for now his priority was simply to survive and get used to this world, especially since the king had said the town was too far away to reach without a map and he could not even be sure of the direction. Hiding behind a tree, Tatsuya organized his immediate priorities, deciding he first needed a safe water source, then shelter, and finally food. He began gathering branches and planned to start a fire, knowing it could drive wild animals from their dens and keep insects from bothering him while he rested. After taking stock of his remaining water, he let out a tired sigh and realized the real problem was not food, but how little water he had left. Estimating his situation carefully, Tatsuya concluded he could last about a week without food, but only 2 or 3 days without water. Then he suddenly noticed something behind him and lit up with surprise as he realized there was a river nearby. But when he rushed over to look, he saw that the riverbank was far muddier than he had expected, making him stop and reassess the situation. Tatsuya scooped up some of the muddy river water and decided he had to boil it first, knowing it was not safe to drink as it was. Staring at the cloudy water in his container, he wondered how he was supposed to filter it. As the dirt settled to the bottom, Tatsuya grew frustrated and wished he could just look up a solution online. Then a message suddenly appeared, telling him he had acquired the skill called Internet at level 10, and he immediately realized he could use it. He understood that the skill had awakened because his strong need to solve the problem had reached a breakthrough point. When he checked his phone, he was amazed to see it had a strong signal and what seemed like unlimited battery life. Even though it felt almost unfair, Tatsuya accepted the advantage with gratitude and quickly searched for how to filter water. Following the instructions he found, he built a simple filter by layering materials inside a cut bottle. He poured the water through the filter, then set a pot over the fire and boiled it carefully to make it safe. After letting it cool, Tatsuya finally drank and was overwhelmed by how good the clean water tasted. After drinking the boiled water, Tatsuya checked himself and felt relieved that everything seemed fine. Using the internet skill to check his next priorities, he realized how powerful the search function was and decided to secure water and find shelter first. With those basics handled, he decided the next problem was food and headed into the forest to see what wild fruits or animals he could find. As he searched through the trees, Tatsuya paused when he noticed an empty clearing that felt strange to him. A closer look made him freeze, because the disturbing signs on the ground made Tatsuya realize a tragedy had happened there. Near the remains, he spotted an old hoe lying in the grass. When he picked it up, he saw that it was filthy and badly rusted. Carrying the hoe with him, Tatsuya soon discovered a small ruined house standing alone in the forest. He cautiously stepped inside, called out to see if anyone was there, and found the building completely silent. As he looked around the worn interior, Tatsuya concluded that someone had once used the place as a farmhouse. Tatsuya worried that the previous resident might have died from disease, and he grimly realized the same fate could have been waiting for him. While searching the farmhouse, he found some tableware and confirmed that no food supplies had been left behind. Looking out from the house, Tatsuya thought it would be ideal if he could work the land and grow fresh produce. But when he examined a field, he saw the soil was in terrible condition and knew he had no seeds anyway. Just then, Tatsuya was startled by a new ability appearing before him, Seed Creation, level 10. As he tried to understand it, the skill explained that it could produce fast-growing bean sprouts. A bright glow gathered in his hands, and a pile of tiny seeds suddenly appeared, making him shout in shock. Staring at the seeds in disbelief, Tatsuya could only mutter that it made no sense. Standing in the ruined field with the hoe, he wondered if this was yet another cheat-like skill he had been given. Then he remembered that bean sprouts can grow even with very little sunlight. Remembering that bean sprouts could grow in a dim place within about a week, Tatsuya decided to give it a try. The moment he started working the field, another ability activated, and his farming tool tore through the soil with explosive force. Tatsuya was stunned as the work suddenly became unbelievably easy, and in no time the ground was being turned over at remarkable speed. Looking at the neatly plowed field in front of the farmhouse, he realized this was clearly another cheat-like skill. He carried over some logs, scattered the newly created seeds onto the prepared soil, and improvised a simple planting setup. Just as he finished, yet another ability appeared before him, Crops Cultivation level 10. As faint lights began gathering around the planted area, Tatsuya wondered if this skill was meant to speed up crop growth. Even so, he reminded himself that he could not survive on beans alone. Thinking it through, Tatsuya concluded that he needed some kind of carbohydrates besides bean sprouts. Then he realized that if he grew root vegetables, he might be able to secure a more filling food source without waiting too long. Tatsuya realized that lotus roots and carrots could also provide the carbohydrates he needed. Just then, a new upgrade appeared, activating a seed creation ability, and he thought these crops could serve as substitutes until he could grow rice or wheat later. Light gathered in his hands, and a fresh pile of seeds formed there as the new skill took effect. Looking at them closely, Tatsuya confirmed that he now had carrot seeds. He decided that rice and wheat would have to wait, so for now he focused on what he could grow immediately. Then another possibility crossed his mind, and he suddenly turned as if struck by a bad feeling. In the forest behind him, a terrifying demonic beast revealed itself among the trees. Tatsuya quickly realized the creature was one of the demons, and he panicked as he understood that the amulet's protection had failed. Frozen in shock with his tool still in hand, he found himself staring at the beast as it fixed its eyes on him from the edge of the field. The monster lunged straight at him, and Tatsuya instantly understood that he was the target. As the demonic beast rushed him, a new skill suddenly activated, enhancing Tatsuya's farming tool right in the middle of the attack. The upgraded tool released a surge of power, and Tatsuya stared in shock as the force burst out on its own. Feeling intense heat in his chest as the power seemed to respond, he gripped the tool and tried to understand what was happening. With sweat running down his face, Tatsuya realized he had no idea what kind of ability had just awakened. A moment later, blasts erupted around the monster, and Tatsuya turned in disbelief as the sudden attack overwhelmed it. When the smoke cleared, he found himself sitting on the ground among scorched marks, realizing that his farming tool had leveled up. Looking at the charred remains, Tatsuya concluded that turning demon meat into a proper meal was probably impossible. Standing by the field with the forest ahead of him, he admitted the fight had changed nothing about one basic problem: he was still hungry. He remembered hearing that curry could make almost anything edible, but even so, this did not seem worth trying. In the end, Tatsuya decided to keep searching for food and settled on one practical conclusion. For now, carrots would have to do. Tatsuya stared off in thought and wondered if the monster might actually be edible. Comparing it to familiar animals, he reasoned that snake meat was probably similar to poultry in terms of protein and quietly considered the idea. Looking over this striped serpent-like beast, he decided it resembled a kind of snake found back in Japan, which meant it was probably safe to eat. Sitting and facing the open land ahead, Tatsuya then moved on to the next problem and asked himself how he was supposed to catch one. He suddenly came up with a rough plan, thinking that if burning hair produced a smell similar to snakes, it might lure some in. After preparing the bait and setting it out, he committed to the idea and waited to see if it would work. The plan worked more easily than expected, and while noticing new sprouts already pushing up from the soil, he reflected that he had managed to catch 2 snakes without much trouble. By the next day, the beans had already grown enough to look ready to eat, so he decided to save the snakes for lunch. Even so, the speed of the beans' growth was so unnatural that it left him slightly unsettled. Since he had heard that snake could taste like chicken, Tatsuya tried cooking it in a way he hoped would turn out well. Tatsuya served himself a pot of striped snake and beans, deciding it was finally time to see how his improvised meal had turned out. He took a careful bite, and his first reaction was uncertain as he tried to figure out the flavor. After thinking it over, he admitted that it actually was not bad at all. Looking closer, he realized the beans had an unexpectedly crunchy texture, which caught him off guard. The surprise hit him all at once, and he nearly choked as the strange texture completely overturned his expectations. But once he adjusted, Tatsuya was shocked to find that the dish was genuinely delicious. After finishing the meal, he leaned back with a full stomach and let himself enjoy the moment. Under the night sky, he thought that if the beans tasted this good, then looking for the carrots had definitely been the right choice. The next day, he checked the field and saw that the carrots already looked ready to harvest. Pleased with the result, Tatsuya pulled them up and decided that today he would cook the snake together with the beans and carrots. Tatsuya realized he had run out of seasoning, leaving the meal with only its basic ingredients. Even so, he told himself that having anything to eat was enough and took another spoonful from the pot. The moment he tried it, he was surprised by how unexpectedly pleasant the flavor was. He quickly decided the dish was so good that he would be happy to eat it regularly. As he kept eating, he was impressed that the beans were nicely crunchy and that the whole dish tasted more like fruit than vegetables. Delighted, Tatsuya laughed and said the meal felt wonderfully satisfying. Nearby, the rabbit-eared girl peeked out from behind a tree and closely watched his reaction to the harvest. Looking over the harvest, she focused on the carrots and declared them especially valuable. She could not hold back her excitement any longer and said she had never seen such an impressive crop before. Seeing her sudden reaction, Tatsuya was left in shock and could only think that he truly had ended up in a fantasy world. Tatsuya stared in amazement and thought that this truly was a fantasy world beyond anything he had imagined. The rabbit-eared girl was overwhelmed with excitement and struggled to put her feelings into words. She quickly insisted that she was not the kind of rabbit who stole carrots, while Tatsuya watched her with cautious surprise. Looking at the strange but charming girl, Tatsuya became even more convinced that he had been reincarnated into a fantasy world. Tatsuya bluntly pointed out that she clearly seemed to be after the carrots and asked if she really wanted them. The girl introduced her people as the pocket-sized rabbits, a rabbit family living in the forest. She explained that when members of her people become adults, they set out alone to carry out a ritual, and Tatsuya listened closely. In the ritual, they must return with treasure so their growth will be recognized by the others. With sudden confidence, she declared that the treasure she sought was the carrot. Tatsuya realized that among the rabbit people, carrots must be treated as valuable treasures, even though she probably did not know they grew naturally in the wild. The rabbit girl stared at the carrots with shining eyes and said that the more she looked at them, the more valuable they seemed. Tatsuya moved the bowl toward her, and she reacted in surprise as it came closer. He scooped out some steamed carrot pieces left over from breakfast and set them aside for her. The moment he told her she could have them, she rushed over and started eating at incredible speed. With pure delight, she said it was the sweetest and most delicious carrot she had ever tasted. Tatsuya could only stare, surprised that carrots could taste that sweet to someone else too. As she kept eating, she declared that this was a magnificent treasure, and if she could bring it back, she could return home as a hero. Hearing that, Tatsuya asked if she wanted to take some with her. When he offered her several carrots and reminded her that she wanted to return as a hero, she lit up with excitement and eagerly accepted. Overjoyed, the rabbit girl ran off through the forest waving back at Tatsuya while he remained behind and watched her go. As the trap sat there crackling uselessly, Tatsuya admitted to himself that it was unfortunate he had not caught a single snake. Thinking it over, he wondered if he had used too little bait, since not even one snake had come out. While his pot simmered, Tatsuya grimly thought that surviving on only carrots and beans would taste fine at first, but it was seriously lacking in protein. Unsure what to do, he remembered that tofu was rich in protein and considered whether he could make something similar from beans. Sitting inside his shelter, he suddenly heard a disturbance outside and looked up in surprise. The noise continued through the forest, and Tatsuya listened carefully, wondering what it was. A group of rabbit people rushed in excitedly, pointing him out as the big person who had the carrots. Caught off guard by the sudden crowd and their questions about sweet carrots, Tatsuya could only tense up and wonder if this was some kind of payback. Before he could stop them, the rabbit people led a huge boar straight toward him, leaving Tatsuya stunned as he shouted in alarm. Smiling proudly, the rabbit people declared that this boar was their way of thanking him for the sweet carrots. Looking at the enormous boar the rabbit people had brought down, Tatsuya realized they were far stronger than they looked. As he stared in surprise, the rabbit people cheerfully made it clear that they wanted to trade this animal for more carrots. Seeing the boar placed before him, Tatsuya finally understood that they had brought it as part of a trade. When Tatsuya asked if they had hunted it themselves, the rabbit people proudly declared that they were a hunting tribe. Still confused, Tatsuya asked whether rabbit people were not supposed to live on vegetables like carrots. One rabbit girl explained that carrots were only a rare treat for them, while their main diet was meat. That revelation hit Tatsuya all at once, and he was stunned to learn that the rabbits in this world were omnivores. Even as he tried to process that information, one of the rabbit girls casually climbed onto his shoulder. Then the group happily suggested a steady trade, offering meat in exchange for carrots and saying they would be staying nearby for a while. As the conversation ended, Tatsuya looked around and counted the newcomers, realizing that the number of people living near his shelter had suddenly increased fast. Faced with the massive boar, Tatsuya nervously looked up how to butcher it while the tiny onlookers cheered him on. Following the guide step by step, he carefully cut the meat apart, and the rabbit people celebrated as the usable portions piled up. After seasoning and preparing the ingredients, Tatsuya finished a simple boar steak dish with bean sprouts and carrot garnish. Staring at the plate, he admitted it looked more like pork than boar, though the smell was surprisingly good. Deciding there was no point hesitating, Tatsuya finally took his first bite. The result was disappointing, and although he accepted that his protein problem was technically solved, the taste was far from great. With food settled for the moment, Tatsuya turned to construction and raised a tool to start chopping wood. He brought it down with force, striking hard as the impact sent pieces flying. Soon the shelter was being expanded, its rough wooden frame quickly taking shape with new boards and supports. As Tatsuya kept working on the building, the rabbit people cheerfully called out that it was time for lunch and got his attention. Tatsuya kept hammering the boards into place as the rabbit people excitedly told him they would handle the meal and asked him to wait. As he worked, Tatsuya realized the rabbit people were useful around the shelter, helping with chores and even bringing him monsters in exchange for carrots, which made him think they were not a threat. While eating, Tatsuya was asked by the rabbit people why he was repairing the hut. He answered plainly that he intended to move into the hut, leaving them surprised by the decision. Tatsuya reflected that thanks to their help, the shortage of meat had eased, and he finally had more time to focus on other things. Looking ahead, he figured wheat and rice would take around 1 to 2 months to grow and harvest, so until then he planned to stay here and use the time to search for signs of other people instead of remaining in the damp cave. Hearing that, he noted that the cabin's former occupant clearly did not need it anymore, and the rabbit people eagerly offered to help him. Then, Tatsuya noticed his supply of nails was nearly gone and asked if they could help him make some replacements. The rabbit people quickly said they had found some minerals nearby and immediately asked for carrots in return. They then explained that adventurers called the remains of fallen equipment minerals, and that metal from armor and swords could be melted down to create new metal for crafting. Tatsuya noted that the rabbit people could even hollow out wood and help him make simple tableware. He realized their small size made them especially good at careful, detailed jobs that humans would struggle with. To put it simply, even a single carrot was enough reward for them to happily help with the work. The more he watched them, the more Tatsuya felt they were incredibly useful companions around the shelter. Before long, the repairs were complete, and the restored shack and new storage building stood finished as the rabbit people celebrated. In just one day, they had repaired the shack, built a warehouse, and even assigned the smallest rabbit people to guard it from thieves and mice. Even so, Tatsuya let out a sigh and admitted that he was still going to miss living in the cave. Then he made up his mind and declared that they should celebrate his move into the new shack. The rabbit people reacted in surprise, confused by what he meant about moving in and celebrating. Seeing their reaction, Tatsuya smiled to himself and thought they would probably enjoy the idea once they understood it. Tatsuya started cooking, and the pot bubbled as the ingredients simmered together over the fire. He finished a special curry made with boar meat and diced carrots, filling a large bowl for everyone to share. The rabbit people eagerly tasted it and burst into praise, calling the carrot curry incredibly delicious, and even joking that Tatsuya must be some kind of master chef. They immediately demanded more, and Tatsuya could only stare in disbelief at how quickly they were eating. In no time, the pot was nearly empty, with only a small amount of curry left. Surrounded by empty dishes and rabbit people who had already dozed off, Tatsuya slumped at the table and realized he had not gotten a single bite. He sighed and wondered what he was supposed to eat now. Then he noticed one rabbit person sleeping nearby and realized he had not properly thanked this hard-working group yet. He gently patted the sleeping rabbit person, trying to wake them without causing a fuss. As the rabbit person stirred in confusion, Tatsuya quietly prepared to speak to them. The rabbit person he woke up immediately pleaded for more curry, sounding half asleep and completely focused on the meal. Tatsuya paused in confusion, not expecting that to be the first response he got. The exhausted rabbit people continued to stir and mumble in their sleep, still thinking about the food they had just eaten. Hearing their reactions, Tatsuya could only marvel at how overwhelmingly successful the curry had been. After drifting off himself, he slowly opened his eyes as sunlight filled the room. Checking his phone, he realized it was already 12,024 and that lunchtime had long since passed. Sitting up with a tired stretch, Tatsuya muttered that they should have woken him earlier. He looked around the quiet room and noticed that the rabbit people were no longer there. Calling out to them, he headed outside and spotted the storage building nearby. Reaching the spot, Tatsuya let out a tired sigh and called to the group, ready to see what they were up to. Tatsuya opened the storage space and found only a pair of rabbit-like feet sticking out from under the piled blankets, leaving him speechless. Covering his mouth in shock, he wondered what was going on and whether they were some kind of wandering nomads. As he looked around in confusion, Tatsuya realized they had left without giving him any notice. Outside, under the bright afternoon sun, he crouched in the overgrown field in gloomy silence. He sat back near the bedding while a pot continued steaming over the fire, holding the remaining ingredients and staring blankly as if trying to process the situation. With the lonely house behind him, Tatsuya slumped over the table in complete disappointment. Then, all at once, the rabbit people burst back in energetically, and Tatsuya sprang up in surprise as he called out, asking where they had gone. A rabbit-eared woman greeted him cheerfully, thanked him for taking care of her children, and caught him completely off guard. Still smiling, she introduced herself as Sonia, and Tatsuya awkwardly asked who she was. As he studied her, Tatsuya guessed she might be the queen of the rabbit people and asked why she had come there. Sonia explained that her children had told her about him. She said they had found a place with excellent carrots and had become friends with the person living there. Sonia added that because of that, they planned to move their den here, though she joked that having regular meat would make the arrangement even better. With a playful smile, Sonia said she was looking forward to getting to know Tatsuya. After that, even more rabbit people began gathering, and the number of residents around the house increased again. Watching the situation spiral even further, Tatsuya clenched his fist and thought he was reaching his limit. Even so, he went back to cooking, while someone nearby asked what they would be eating that day. As he prepared the meal, Tatsuya realized he had run out of seasoning once again. Hearing that, one of the rabbit people suggested that salt might be causing the bitter taste and that the carrot's sweetness should still come through. In the end, Tatsuya reflected that the boar the rabbit people had caught was very tasty, but it was disappointing that there had been almost no seasoning. While eating, Tatsuya thought that with more people and proper sauce, the meat would be even better, and he wished he could somehow get Japanese seasonings. Then his skill, Goods from Other Dimensions level 10, activated, and something suddenly appeared in front of him. What arrived was a large offering box and a shrine-like structure labeled Abundance of Harvest. Tatsuya stared at it in disbelief and wondered why a shrine and an offering box had suddenly appeared. A voice identified itself as the God of Abundant Harvest, leaving Tatsuya completely stunned. The voice explained that because Tatsuya was a master of agriculture, speaking with him was within its power, making him wonder whether he was imagining things. As the god continued, it spoke of fate and promised that Tatsuya's future harvests would exceed his current results, even though he admitted he had no idea what was happening. Tatsuya silently wondered why his good skill had summoned a harvest god in the first place. The god answered his thoughts directly, saying it was natural for him to doubt, but that raising rich harvests with joyful effort should be more than enough for someone like him, which left Tatsuya shaken. In the end, the god simply asked him to keep farming, saying a stable and comfortable life depended on it, while Tatsuya could only wonder if he was really that bad at agriculture. The harvest god said that if seasoning was within the reach of its divine authority, then it could provide some. Hearing that, Tatsuya lit up and eagerly asked what he needed to do. The god told him to take what had appeared, and when Tatsuya opened it, he found what looked like a gift catalog instead of seasoning. Flipping through the pages, Tatsuya searched for condiments and noticed familiar items from Japan. Then he realized the problem and blurted out in shock that the items required money. The god calmly explained that collecting offerings was exactly what an offering box was for, and admitted that too few farmers worshipped it these days, so it was short on funds. It further explained that once local currency was placed in the box, it would be converted into Japanese yen for use. Looking at the catalog, Tatsuya could only sigh and accept that money was the key to getting what he wanted. His thoughts then turned to Sonia, and the scene shifted to her resting on the ground as she answered his call. Tatsuya pointed out that Sonia spent a lot of time lounging around, and she answered with amused confidence that she was a queen after all. Tatsuya asked Sonia if she happened to have any money to spare. Sonia explained that her people did not really use money, but they had gathered a bag of gold coins from monsters defeated around the area. Smiling proudly, Sonia held out the bag and said the coins even looked nice. She tossed the heavy bag to Tatsuya, and he barely managed to catch it as she reacted cheerfully. Sonia then said she would accept a carrot in exchange for the bag. Tatsuya stared in disbelief, and Sonia explained that 1 carrot was enough because they had no real use for money anyway. Accepting the trade, Tatsuya dropped a coin into the offering box as instructed. A catalog appeared in his hands, and when he checked it while glancing at the box and the money beside him, he fell silent. Realizing how little the exchange gave him, Tatsuya cried out that the whole system felt like a complete scam. Off to the side, the god calmly reminded him that, as already stated, it currently had almost no funds, likely because people now prayed more to other gods such as those of commerce or childbirth. The god protested in a flustered tone, saying Tatsuya already had options and should not be angry at the only help available. Tatsuya argued that the deal was ridiculous, saying that if the world's gold was being exchanged into Japanese yen, the amount should be worth at least several thousand yen. The god bluntly admitted the support was mostly a front, and that the real goal was to collect money from people like him, making Tatsuya call the deity unbelievably cheap. Even while recognizing it as a ripoff, Tatsuya forced himself to think practically and admitted that transportation to another world was still something priceless in his current situation. Looking down at the bag of coins, he could only mutter that the whole arrangement still felt like a scam. He poured out the coins as an offering, while the god calmly noted that this was exactly what it had been counting on. After checking the result, Tatsuya saw the number 325, and froze in shock before reacting in disbelief. Then his attention landed on one item in the catalog, and he stared at it as if he had found treasure. In a burst of triumph, Tatsuya raised it high and declared that he had managed to get the yakiniku sauce he had desperately wanted. A little later, he and Sonia eagerly watched as he poured the sauce over a steaming meal, turning the simple food into something far more exciting. The meal was introduced as yakiniku dipped boar with beans and carrots, with the sauce finally added to complete the dish. Sonia took a bite and immediately lit up, saying she had never eaten anything so amazing before. The others enthusiastically praised every part of the dish, declaring it so delicious that it felt worthy of the gods. Watching their reactions, Tatsuya decided it was finally his turn to taste it for himself. He carefully took a bite, quietly wondering how it would turn out. The flavor hit him at once, and he reeled back in shock as the others watched his stunned reaction. Tatsuya realized the meat was packed with rich flavor, and the dish seemed to awaken all his senses at once. As he kept chewing, he was overwhelmed by how the sauce deepened the taste and made the whole meal even more impressive. He then noticed that the beans had absorbed the richness while keeping their texture, and that the carrots added a perfect sweetness, leaving him completely thrilled by the combination. His shout of praise echoed into the darkness as he declared the meal unbelievably good. After finishing the meal, everyone leaned back in satisfaction, amazed at how delicious it had been, while one of them admitted to eating 3 full servings without even noticing. Sonia happily said it was the best thing she had ever eaten, and Tatsuya casually explained that rabbits often have very strong food preferences. Hearing that, Sonia innocently repeated his comment in an exaggerated way, making Tatsuya realize it sounded much more dramatic than he had intended. Tatsuya immediately panicked and asked her what she had just said, while Sonia calmly tried to move on to another topic. Sonia casually brought up something one of her children had told her, as if it were an ordinary topic. Sonia approached Tatsuya and said she had heard he possessed a remarkable skill, which made him panic because her serious tone suggested she had misunderstood his earlier explanation. Sonia then asked Tatsuya to teach her that special skill as well, but because she seemed to have the wrong idea about what he meant, the conversation became awkward and confusing for him. Tatsuya threw up his hands in panic and quickly told her to wait, trying to clear up the misunderstanding before it turned into a bigger embarrassment. Sonia noticed his uneasy reaction and asked what was wrong. Tatsuya was concerned because Sonia looked much younger than he expected, and Sonia reassured him that she was actually 22 since her people mature differently. Sonia calmly explained that she was 22 years old and that rabbit folk like her tend to live very long lives. She then asked him gently whether that misunderstanding was causing a problem in their conversation. Tatsuya quickly insisted that it was not a problem at all. As the conversation continued, Sonia started comparing rabbit folk to other animals in a way that made Tatsuya worry the topic was turning into an awkward cultural misunderstanding. She confidently concluded that the rumors had been true and praised rabbit folk as exceptional, which only made Tatsuya more confused about what she meant. Overwhelmed by how awkward and unclear the conversation had become, Tatsuya could only groan in defeat. By morning, Sonia was nearby and softly asked whether he was awake. She cheerfully greeted him good morning, and Tatsuya answered her in return, still looking caught off guard. The scene then shifted outside, where the fields stood quietly under the morning light. Looking over the garden near the house, Tatsuya was surprised to see even more new crops, while Sonia proudly pointed out garlic, chives, and yams growing on the right side. Tatsuya fell silent, then awkwardly asked her to explain again why there were apparently 3 different varieties. From her proud reaction, he understood that Sonia was complimenting the amount of effort he had put into the work, which only deepened his confusion. Tatsuya reflected in stunned embarrassment that her non-stop comments from the evening to the morning had been far more exhausting and overwhelming than he could handle. Later, while he was outside in the fields, 2 fox-eared girls suddenly approached him from both sides, prompting a tense confrontation. One of them blurted out in surprise and confusion, demanding to know who he was. She quickly introduced herself as Elisa Chuman of the Fox tribe, and guessed that Tatsuya was an adventurer. Tatsuya, still wary, asked her directly what she wanted from him. Elisa stared at him in disbelief and asked if he truly did not understand the situation. She explained that as a human standing on farmland near the boundary between the human world and the demon world, he had wandered into the demon world itself, making Tatsuya realize this fantasy-like place was real. The fox girls moved closer to inspect him and concluded that he carried neither a scent bag nor a protective barrier, which made him seem even more out of place. Elisa explained that a scented pouch gives off an odor that keeps demon beasts away, and the barrier charm helps prevent monster attacks. Tatsuya compared it to an incense stick used to keep mosquitoes away and quietly thought it made sense. He then asked why they lived here at all, if they already had many ways to repel monsters, and Elisa hesitated before answering. Tatsuya pointed out that this place should have been full of monsters, especially since he had already run into so many. In his head, he recalled defeating every monster he met with a single strike, but he also realized that explanation would probably be hard for her to believe. When he asked what kind of people they were, Elisa introduced their group as the snatching kind of creature. She explained that there was a deadly dungeon nearby, and they took the equipment left behind by fallen adventurers and brought it back to the town guild. Elisa clarified that the recovered gear was exchanged for money, the money was delivered to the grieving families, and their group kept a 10% commission. Tatsuya immediately objected, saying they were the ones risking their lives in the dungeon, so taking only 10% did not sound fair, but she answered that it was safer because they worked as a group. Hearing that, Tatsuya suddenly paused, clearly struck by a new thought. Tatsuya lit up and asked whether the town Elisa mentioned was close enough to reach on foot, and she told him it was about 40 kilometers to the southeast. He clenched his fists in relief and celebrated the idea of finding an actual town with people, while Elisa warned him not to get his hopes up too much. When he looked confused, Elisa explained that the town's political situation was unstable and the place itself was in disorder, so he should be prepared for trouble. Even so, she said it was still valuable that he now knew where the town was, then shifted the conversation by praising the herbal tea in front of them. Tatsuya took a sip and agreed, saying the herbs were the kind his fellow campers had once introduced him to. Elisa froze in surprise and asked if that meant there were other people with him. As Tatsuya sat there holding his cup, a tiny figure perched nearby reacted at once, and Elisa suddenly asked if he was drinking herbal tea. The moment she realized what he meant, Elisa scrambled back in panic and shouted that it was made from pocket rabbits. Tatsuya was startled by her outburst, and Elisa frantically explained that those creatures were extremely dangerous and could even bring down a powerful death boar. She then recalled a famous disaster in which a king crushed one of their carrots during a hunt, and 200 pocket rabbits responded so violently that they devastated the royal residence and nearby towns in a massive war. Elisa explained that other nations had once tried to calm the pocket rabbits by bringing them carrots, but the creatures rejected anything grown outside the forest. Tatsuya, still baffled, admitted it was his first time hearing any of this, and asked how she had ever managed to befriend them. Looking at the tiny creature by his cup, Tatsuya guessed that giving them food might have made them grow attached to him. Elisa quickly asked what kind of carrot he had used, and Tatsuya casually replied that the rabbits had praised it as the best carrot they had ever tasted, and that one had even brought him a wild boar in thanks. Shaken by that answer, Elisa insisted he must have used no ordinary carrot and told him that calling it taming was far too misleading. The mention of a wild boar made Elisa pause, visibly alarmed as she processed what he had just said. She suddenly demanded to know whether the boar's hide and teeth were still nearby, while Tatsuya awkwardly admitted he had kept them for the time being. Tatsuya added that he had been thinking the hide could be used for gloves and that he was about to throw away the teeth and bones. Elisa immediately told him not to discard any of it, even as Tatsuya could tell from her reaction that she clearly wanted the materials. In the next moment, Elisa rushed outside in a panic, shouting for the devil boar and demanding to know where Tatsuya had stored it. Elisa rushed to the storage area, found the preserved devil boar materials, and lit up with amazement the moment she saw them. Overjoyed, she grabbed Tatsuya's hand and declared that this was exactly what she needed. Elisa quickly proposed a deal, asking him to let her handle all the boar materials except the meat, and promising to buy everything from him. Tatsuya agreed uncertainly, and Elisa immediately treated the arrangement as settled. Holding the small rabbit near his shoulder, Tatsuya paused and asked if she really meant to pay him in advance. Elisa answered at once that she would return in 4 days. She explained that she would first take the materials to town, sell them there, cover the processing costs herself, and then bring his share of the money back. Tatsuya accepted, thinking that if devil boar materials sold for that much, he might be able to improve his livelihood. Just then, the door opened and another girl named Sonia arrived, calling out to Tatsuya while he was still wondering about dinner. Tatsuya asked where Sonia had been, and she cheerfully replied that she had simply gone out for a walk. The cheerful visitor greeted Sonia as Tatsuya's guest and introduced herself with bright enthusiasm. The moment Tatsuya explained that there was a queen among the rabbits, Elisa was so overwhelmed that she nearly collapsed on the spot. He then showed everyone the enormous bird they had captured, and its sheer size left the whole place in stunned silence. Tatsuya, still amazed, asked how they had possibly managed to catch something that huge. The girls happily explained that they had spread a net from tree to tree and wrapped it tightly around the bird. They added that once it was caught in the net, they secured it and completed the capture, and Tatsuya had to admit that simple method had somehow worked. Seeing the giant bird up close, Tatsuya was amazed and said it was exactly the kind of large specimen he had hoped to study. As he began processing it, his knife caught partway through, and he carefully adjusted his approach. While inspecting the meat, he noted that it was very fatty and seemed similar to duck. Just then, Elisa burst in energetically and announced that she had brought the money. When he heard that the giant bird was a death hawk, Tatsuya froze in shock at what they had managed to catch. He was then told that a death hawk was an S-class monster, and that its meat, claws, and beak could all be sold for an enormous amount. As he examined the bird, Tatsuya admitted he had no idea how the pocket rabbits had managed to hunt something so dangerous, while one of the girls joked that he must have done something strange to tame them. Elisa then asked what he had come for today, and Tatsuya answered that he wanted to ask about the sale price of the devil boar body parts she had given him. She handed over a small bag, and when Tatsuya looked inside, he was stunned to hear that it contained 600 gold coins. Since he still did not understand the value of money in this world, Tatsuya asked Elisa what 600 gold coins were actually worth. Thinking it through in comparison to Japan, he learned that a town guard's starting wage was about 20 gold coins, while 1 gold coin was roughly equal to 10,000 yen. The math hit him all at once, and Tatsuya stared in disbelief as he realized he had suddenly become incredibly rich. Elisa smiled at his reaction, and Tatsuya happily confirmed that the devil boar had really been worth that much. Even while holding the bag, Tatsuya was still confused by how such a large amount of money could fit so lightly into something so small. When Elisa explained that the bar was made of orichalcum and that each one was worth 100 gold coins, Tatsuya could only stare and think that this world really did feel like a fantasy game. As he compared the amount to the small offering box donations he knew from Japan, Tatsuya realized that even including Elisa's earlier payment and the leftover change from last time, it still came to only a few hundred yen by that standard. Later, Elisa invited him to stay at the storehouse for the evening and offered to make him a thank you meal for everything he had been through, so Tatsuya asked what she planned to cook. The answer came with excitement, and Tatsuya eagerly declared it would be a carriage night as he got the seasonings ready. Before long, he prepared death-hot karaage with deep-fried carrots, using salad oil and karaage powder. The moment the food was ready, the girls reacted with wide-eyed amazement at the wonderful smell and the impressive dish in front of them. As they started eating, everyone immediately praised how good it was and how delicious it smelled, while Tatsuya watched from the side. The group happily kept eating, listing off the meat and carrots between bites and declaring that they truly loved karaage and wanted more. In no time, the calls for seconds rang out so fast that Tatsuya was hit with a strong sense of déjà vu. Even Elisa, after a cautious first bite, admitted that it was good and decided to keep eating. Elisa kept chewing quietly, taking in the taste with a thoughtful expression. A moment later, her eyes widened and she broke into a delighted smile, amazed by how good it was. She excitedly called out to Tatsuya in the kitchen, declaring that it was the best thing she had ever eaten. Tatsuya turned back and dryly reminded her to call him by his proper name instead of shouting at him like that. Still happily eating, she told Tatsuya that she finally understood why the pocket rabbits liked him so much, and that it was not just because of the carrots or the food. Tatsuya reacted with tired disbelief as the tiny rabbits nearby enjoyed the place so much that it looked like paradise to them. The frying continued to sizzle as the group immediately started asking for more servings. Elisa, smiling brightly, said it was delicious and urged Tatsuya to try some himself if it was really as good as everyone claimed. Looking at the growing pile already on its 5th serving, Tatsuya admitted he had not tasted it yet and wondered what death hawk meat would be like. At last, Tatsuya picked up a piece and decided it was finally time for him to eat. Tatsuya finally took a bite for himself, and his face immediately showed how impressed he was by the taste. With total excitement, he declared that the death hawk meat was unbelievably good. As he kept chewing, he noted the satisfying texture and rich flavor, and he understood at once why Elisa had enjoyed it so much. Even though it was still hot enough to sting a little, he did not care and only wanted another bite. After finishing, Tatsuya happily admitted it was delicious, then started thinking it would be even better served with rice and a proper side dish. Elisa beamed beside him and said the meal had been truly delicious. Smiling warmly, Elisa asked Tatsuya if she could come back and enjoy more of his cooking again sometime. From that point on, the thank you feast was remembered as a huge success. Later, Tatsuya stood out in the field with a serious look, thinking about his most cherished goal. At last, that wish had come true, and he proudly held up a freshly harvested bulb of garlic. As the pan sizzled, Tatsuya announced that tonight's dinner would be garlic steak, and Elisa excitedly said she was looking forward to it. But when Elisa noticed there was no garlic available, she looked confused as Tatsuya worked in the kitchen. A sudden knock at the door interrupted them, and Tatsuya, surprised, told Elisa that at least the visitor seemed healthy before asking who it was. When he opened the door, a woman apologized for arriving late and politely asked if it was all right for her to stop by. She then shyly asked whether she could have something to eat, leaving Tatsuya completely caught off guard. Tatsuya hesitated and explained that he had only just prepared dinner, but the woman said the amazing aroma had drawn her in. Introducing herself as Maria, she explained that she was a demon who had been banished from the demon world. She added that after being banished she had lost her powers, and now she was simply very hungry, which left Tatsuya speechless. Hearing her explanation, Tatsuya repeated in disbelief that she was a demon like Maria claimed. Even while flustered, Tatsuya compared her presence to Sonia's and found Maria unexpectedly striking, while Elisa watched from beside him. Tatsuya invited Maria to join them for dinner if she was hungry, while the garlic steak continued to sizzle in the pan. The rich smell stopped Maria in her tracks, and she stared at the meal in stunned silence. After tasting it, Maria was overwhelmed and declared that the flavor was so incredible that even the finest cooks of the demon world could not match it. As Maria hurried through the food, Tatsuya warned that she might choke if she kept eating that fast, while Elisa watched with a cheerful smile. In no time, the plate was completely empty, with even the meat and carrots gone. Then, a strange change in the atmosphere made Tatsuya and Elisa look up in confusion. Realizing something unusual was happening again, Tatsuya watched as Maria suddenly reacted as if the meal had triggered a powerful effect. Maria panicked as the garlic-triggered surge in her demon power caused an explosive outburst that shook the newly repaired shack, and she urgently told Tatsuya something was wrong. Struggling to explain herself, Maria said that garlic was tied to the source of her demon power, leaving Tatsuya baffled. Still shaken, Maria added that it had been a long time since she had last eaten garlic, which seemed to explain the sudden surge in her demon power. Maria, still overwhelmed by the garlic's effect on her demon power, admitted in a dazed voice that it was disrupting her condition again. As Maria drifted closer in confusion, Tatsuya quickly tried to calm the situation and asked her to slow down so they could figure out what was happening first. Tatsuya reasoned that the magical power Maria had lost likely could not have recovered in only a day or two. Still affected by the garlic's lingering impact on her demon power, Maria moved toward Tatsuya in confusion, and he quickly asked her to slow down so they could sort things out first. Flustered, Tatsuya raised his voice and insisted they should not jump to conclusions because they had only just met and did not understand the situation yet. Maria looked crestfallen when she realized Tatsuya was refusing her request for immediate help until he understood what was wrong. After a brief, tense pause, Tatsuya suddenly declared that he had no objection after all. With that abrupt change of heart, he accepted Maria into their household, joking to himself that the old folk tales did not compare to dealing with a real demon in person. A little later, Tatsuya called out an alarm as the noise and confusion around the shack continued and he tried to restore order. Maria stayed close to Elisa as Elisa loudly announced that, because the space was so cramped, they would all have to remain in the same shack for the night as an emergency arrangement, while Tatsuya looked overwhelmed by the situation. Elisa proposed that the three of them stay in the shack until morning, and the exhausted Tatsuya reluctantly agreed to the plan. Tatsuya immediately protested, shouting that the girls had to be out of their minds and pointing out how exhausted and stressed he already was by the ongoing chaos. Maria and Elisa stared at him in surprise and asked whether he really objected to that practical emergency plan. Tatsuya hesitated, clenched his hand, and admitted to himself that pretending the tense situation did not bother him at all would be a lie. In the next instant, he forced himself to answer firmly that there was no problem at all. Even so, Tatsuya quickly realized he was already completely drained, gasping that after dealing with the garlic situation, he was exhausted. At his limit, Tatsuya suddenly triggered a support ability he called Emperor of the Night, unlocking level 10 as he cried out in desperation. A surge of energy burst from him, leaving the others stunned as they exclaimed that Tatsuya looked completely renewed. But the chaos immediately wore everyone down again, and amid the confusion someone weakly called for help while the group struggled to keep up. In the end, the night's household commotion left the girls more exhausted than anyone else, wrapping the whole ordeal up like a joke. Tatsuya said he had worked out the handling fee and handed the payment over, and the others praised him for being dependable while thanking the Deathhawk. As they left, one of the companions called out to Tatsuya and asked if they could talk for a moment. She bluntly told him that Elisa had overcharged them, explaining that the Deathhawk trade should have brought in 1,500 gold and that the fox-eared girl's behavior had seemed suspicious. Tatsuya realized they had only received 750 gold, And she added that even after deducting a fee, losing half the money through an unauthorized deal made no sense. Another ally reacted with open anger, saying Tatsuya had been taken advantage of and asking what they should do about those crafty tricksters. Tatsuya stayed calm and said he did not want to become hostile toward them, since they had given him valuable information and looked after several matters while he was with them. Before the argument could grow, the mood shifted when the group celebrated catching a huge bird and excitedly called for more carriage. Seeing the timing as useful, one companion quietly suggested this was their chance to investigate further while the others were distracted. The plan was set at once, with the group deciding to head into town and check the actual market price for those birds. They then moved out through the forest with a cart carrying the large catch behind them, setting off to confirm whether they had really been cheated. As they moved through the forest with the cart, one cheerful companion rushed ahead, excitedly declaring that they were going shopping while another asked Tatsuya if they should find a place for lunch. Tatsuya wondered whether it was really fine to be so enthusiastic on the hike when a monster nest was supposed to be nearby, but his companion reassured him that things would be fine with them around. Their guide suddenly shouted a warning to the taller members of the group, making Tatsuya look up in alarm. Above them, 2 deathhawks swept across the sky at once, confirming they had found the creatures they were looking for. The eager companion immediately sprang into action, striking with enough force to bring the birds down almost instantly. With the monsters defeated, she happily declared that they should take these back to town as well, and the others quickly agreed while talking about the profit they could make. Another ally joined in and cut down the remaining threats with swift, practiced attacks, showing just how overwhelming the group's strength really was. Watching the battle end so easily, Tatsuya could only trail behind with his tool in hand and think that everyone was so strong they hardly needed his help. Then the ground-level hunt suddenly felt minor when a huge dragon-like monster rose up before them and let out a fierce roar. The party froze for a brief instant at the overwhelming presence, realizing that the real danger had only just appeared. Looking up in shock, the group realized the towering monster before them was an archdragon, an extremely rare creature, and Tatsuya could hardly believe a fully grown dragon had appeared. The archdragon immediately unleashed a massive breath attack, and Tatsuya recoiled in alarm as the blast devastated the area. As the huge dragon loomed over them, one of the girls quickly counted them in, preparing the party to respond together. At her signal to throw, the group launched their attack straight at the dragon's face, forcing the monster into a furious reaction. Their strike connected cleanly, and with a blinding impact, the dragon was brought down almost instantly. With the battle already over, the girls cheerfully praised how reliable they were and explained that their powers had returned after coming back from the demon world, while also joking that dragon meat must taste amazing. Tatsuya immediately agreed that he wanted to take the dragon meat home, speaking with the excitement of someone who understood exactly how valuable such a monster was. Once they calmed down, he pointed out the practical problem that they could sell the bones, teeth, and hide in town, but there was no way to carry everything at once. Just then, a ringing sound interrupted him, and Tatsuya turned in surprise, wondering what was happening this time. The answer came at once when his item box skill reached level 10, and the group reacted like their desperate wish had just been granted. A treasure chest appeared before the group, and they realized it was an inventory box that could store all 3 deathhawks together and solve their transport problem. Tatsuya tested the new storage, and was amazed that his fully developed item box could hold an enormous amount in a space where time itself seemed to stop. Grateful for the sudden gift, he thanked the king and reflected that the unbreakable skills he had received were overwhelmingly powerful. Tatsuya shivered as the girls called out to him, and the scene shifted as they headed back from the forest together. The 3 of them stopped on a hill and looked out at the walled city ahead, finally returning from the hunt. Soon after, they entered the town, moving through a lively street lined with shops and market stalls. They tried grilled dragon meat from a street vendor, but Tatsuya and the others agreed that despite its value, the taste was terrible. While they were still eating, one of the girls suddenly spotted something nearby and called Tatsuya's attention to it. What she had found was the Adventurers Guild, and the group headed inside the busy building filled with armored fighters and gathered townspeople. At the counter, a receptionist welcomed the first-time visitors to the Adventurers Guild and asked how she could help them. Tatsuya told the receptionist that they wanted to trade in some materials, and she calmly asked what they planned to bring out. Just as Tatsuya was about to proceed, one of the girls stopped him, as if remembering something important. She then presented one of the deathhawks, startling the receptionist with the sudden sight of the huge monster. The receptionist stared in disbelief and nervously asked if the creature in front of her was really a deathhawk, while Tatsuya added that he wanted to make sure they took some of the meat home. The guild hall fell into an uproar as everyone nearby reacted in shock, realizing they were looking at a real deathhawk. After checking it, the guild gave the value as 1,500 gold coins, equal to about 15 orichalcum, leaving Tatsuya and the others stunned. Tatsuya immediately realized Elisa had badly underpaid them before, and the group silently shared the same grim conclusion. Thinking it through, he concluded that the previous deal had effectively skimmed off an enormous handling fee, confirming his suspicions about the unfair transaction. Even so, Tatsuya decided he would deal with Elisa later and focus on finishing this trade first, then wondered aloud what the price would be if they had brought in 2 more Deathhawks. With a small laugh, the receptionist told him he was joking beyond reason, since even top-ranked adventurers would struggle to bring down more than one. To verify the next item, the group brought out an archdragon, and the receptionist froze as the enormous creature loomed in front of her. Trembling all over, she could barely believe what she was seeing and stood there in stunned silence. As the dragon's massive face came into view, it became undeniable that the group had really brought an archdragon to the guild. Overwhelmed, the receptionist let out a strained laugh, clearly struggling to process the situation. She quickly apologized for her reaction and explained that an archdragon ranked even higher than a Deathhawk, drawing attention from everyone in the hall. Tatsuya answered modestly, but the contrast only made their achievement sound even more unbelievable to the people listening. When the final appraisal came in, the Deathhawks were worth 1,500 gold each, and the archdragon was worth 10,000, making the total 14,000 gold and leaving Tatsuya wide-eyed. Even while converting the amount in his head, Tatsuya awkwardly reflected that his old sense of money still made the fortune feel strangely unreal. Trying to celebrate early, he joked about buying a huge case of canned beer once he got home, but the receptionist quietly warned that a rural guild branch would not have that much cash on hand. She explained that the nearest branches would have to send additional funds, so the earliest payment could be ready by tomorrow afternoon, and Tatsuya reluctantly accepted it. Sonia and Maria suggested finding a proper inn where everyone could stay together and rest for the night, and the others agreed. Inside the busy guild hall, the group started getting loud until someone told them to keep it down. A man burst through the guild doors in a panic, shouting as he rushed inside from the street. He urgently called for the guildmaster and announced that a disaster had been confirmed in the Forest of No Return. As the hall reacted in shock, he explained that the threat was an evil cyclops and that it had reached SSS rank. When someone suggested reporting it to the king, others immediately argued that even the king could not handle it and that forces from the imperial capital would need to be called in for help. Tatsuya tried to make sense of the warning, repeating that the cyclops was 50 meters tall and wondering how something so overwhelming could even exist. Then an older adventurer was identified as Marcus, the famed adventurer king, instantly changing the mood in the room. The guild members were overjoyed, declaring themselves blessed because the best S-rank adventurer in the guild was there. Marcus answered with a grim look, asking whether they were all trying to get him killed. Marcus declared that if he faced the monster alone, his odds were only even, so he called on anyone brave enough to help him bring it down. One nervous guild member protested that if even Marcus could not handle it, then no one else stood a chance. Marcus grabbed the man and demanded to know whether he valued only his own life, while expecting others to risk theirs instead. Before the confrontation could go any further, someone called out Marcus's name and stopped the tension from rising. Marcus turned and was stunned to see Maria in the guild hall, while she greeted him like an old acquaintance after a long time apart. Sweating with shock, Marcus asked how she had somehow made it all the way from the demon world. Maria answered calmly that a great deal had happened. As the others looked on in confusion, Maria cheerfully said that meeting again like this must be fate. She then proposed that she and Marcus join forces to capture the Cyclops together, leaving him completely caught off guard. Marcus quickly refused, saying that even if the two of them might make the fight more manageable, it still would not be enough for the danger they were facing. Maria brushed aside Marcus's doubts and argued that the tiny rabbit queen and her many offspring would become a serious threat if ignored. She insisted it would be dangerous to leave them alone, saying they had to protect the carrot farm before the creatures destroyed his home. Hearing that the issue involved pocket rabbits, Marcus immediately reconsidered and leaned forward with interest. After taking a drink, Marcus grimly admitted that he finally understood the situation. With the plan decided, the three of them agreed to take the job together and split the reward evenly. Watching the crowd celebrate, the narrator noted in disbelief that things had somehow become even more chaotic than expected. In the forest, a huge cyclops-like monster rose above the trees and swung a massive club as the next stage of the hunt began. The giant's attack slammed into the ground with explosive force, tearing through the area in front of it. One of the women rushed in at close range, darting past the impact zone to strike the monster's leg. She followed up with a swift aerial slash across the creature's neck, forcing the roaring giant backward. The warrior's flying strike hit the Cyclops' face, driving the giant back before everyone later returned home safely. Later, back at the house, Tatsuya heard a knock at the door and answered in a tired voice. The two women burst in full of energy, happily announcing that they were back and that they had missed him. Tatsuya welcomed them inside, relieved to see that everyone had returned safely, then asked what had happened. They explained that the battle had caused major damage across the area, while one of them cheerfully insisted it had all worked out. Maria then reminded him that the Cyclops also had a bounty on it. Hearing that the reward was 50,000 gold coins, Tatsuya lit up with excitement, and the group celebrated the unexpected payday. Their celebration stopped when a stern armored man appeared before them, leaving Tatsuya confused as the mood in the room suddenly changed. Realizing the man was glaring in Maria's direction, Tatsuya nervously pointed it out. Trying to smooth things over, Tatsuya awkwardly apologized, while the armored man silently wondered why someone so ordinary seemed to draw so much attention. The armored man quietly repeated Maria's name, his expression turning heavy with recognition. He explained that Maria was born into nobility, but after difficult events left her abandoned as a child, he took her in and raised her himself. Then he looked Tatsuya over and bluntly asked if he was truly the one standing beside her, leaving Tatsuya caught off guard. With a hard stare, the man told Tatsuya they should settle the matter outside. Standing in the yard facing the veteran warrior, Tatsuya could only wonder how things had escalated this far. The armored man drew his sword and ordered Tatsuya to prepare himself. Tatsuya froze and admitted to himself that the only tool he really knew how to use was a farming hoe. In a panic, he reached into his storage and pulled out a large chest while regretting every second of the situation. Seeing that, the old warrior stared in disbelief as Tatsuya awkwardly presented the hoe, earning an immediate scolding. Watching the strange display, the armored man realized with open frustration that this was not a fight he could take seriously. The veteran studied Tatsuya's stance and immediately saw that his lack of training was obvious. Even so, the old warrior admitted his instincts still warned him not to underestimate Tatsuya. Tatsuya realized that if the man attacked seriously, he could be defeated in an instant. The warrior calmly put his sword away, signaling that he understood the situation now. He told Tatsuya to look after Maria in his place and to treat her kindly, making Tatsuya blink in surprise. Maria quietly called out to Marcos, clearly moved by what he had said. Marcos added that if Tatsuya ever ran into trouble because of him, he would help set things right. As he turned to leave, Marcos said he looked forward to meeting Tatsuya's family someday, leaving the whole yard stunned. Tatsuya could only stare after him and admit he had no idea what had just happened. Watching Marcos depart, Tatsuya could only conclude that the stern warrior had at least turned out to be a decent man in the end. After deciding not to claim the Cyclops bounty to avoid trouble, they headed to the guild for yesterday's reward, while Tatsuya also asked the workshop to break down the archdragon so it could be transported without an item box. The old craftsman lit up at the request and eagerly declared that this was exactly the kind of unusual job he enjoyed. As he looked around the workshop, Tatsuya commented that it was his first time there, and the craftsman happily introduced himself as Laddie, while Tatsuya reflected on how he had always admired construction tools and hardware. Tatsuya then asked whether the materials could be transported directly instead of going through the guild, explaining that they wanted to reduce costs even though the load was quite large. Hearing that, Laddie suddenly focused on the large storage chest and stopped in surprise. Stroking his chin, Laddie realized it was an inventory box and noted that Tatsuya possessed a very rare skill. Tatsuya laughed and clarified that he was not trying to cheat him, adding that since the dragon and hawks were valuable, payment should not be a problem. Reassured, Laddie leaned in with excitement and urged Tatsuya to show him exactly what materials he had brought. Tatsuya then revealed that he had 3 death hawks and an archdragon, and the enormous dragon head appearing before him left Laddie staring straight at it. The next instant, Laddie burst into delighted laughter and shouted in amazement at the incredible haul. As they moved through the forest, the group headed back together while a trail of tiny figures followed behind them. One of the girls angrily suggested they discuss how to deal with the fox-eared traitor, but another voice urged everyone not to rush into it. Tatsuya pointed out that there was no reason to overreact, since she had not actually taken anything from them. Maria still insisted that the traitor's conduct could not be ignored and said they would need some kind of response. Thinking it over carefully, Tatsuya decided they should wait and see what happened next. He reminded Maria that a monster catch carried serious value and that an adventurer's work was not something to take lightly. Tatsuya then proposed a fair approach, saying that if Arisa offered a proper price next time, they could ask why her earlier offer had been so unreasonable and then decide whether any further action was needed. Although Maria felt that plan was a little too lenient, The others noted that Tatsuya was simply being considerate and asked if that was the course they would follow. Later, the scene shifted to a small house where large blocks of dragon meat had already been prepared and laid out. Seeing the finished haul, Tatsuya lit up with excitement as the others reacted in amazement, and he happily declared that this dragon meat was precious. Tatsuya looked at the arch-dragon meat and declared that it surpassed even top-grade beef, then wondered how he should cook something so valuable. As he considered different seasonings, he thought the finest sauce might elevate the dish even further. He settled on a simple preparation and presented an arch-dragon shoulder roast steak seasoned only with salt and pepper. The others reacted at once, overwhelmed by the rich aroma and praising how incredible it already seemed. Tatsuya then chose wasabi soy sauce as the best match for such high-quality meat, while one of the others excitedly praised the ingredients. With everything ready, they finally began the meal. The first bite hit Tatsuya so hard that he immediately blurted out that it was absolutely delicious. He explained that the wasabi had balanced the natural richness perfectly, far better than using only salt and pepper. One of the women cheerfully suggested that they celebrate the feast with drinks. To complete the meal, they paired the premium dragon meat with a fine red wine. Tatsuya raised his glass and shouted that it was the best, completely won over by the meal and the wine. As the wine was poured, the group noted how its flavor lingered pleasantly and blended well with the food. Everyone kept praising the taste, with Tatsuya happily agreeing that he could not get enough either. Tatsuya enjoyed another bite with a drink and thought the combination of the meat and wine was so good he never wanted it to end. Even the next piece seemed irresistible, and he admitted the feast was so good that he could not stop eating. The table relaxed into cheerful laughter as all three of them enjoyed the meal and drinks together. Just then, Elisa energetically arrived at the house after noticing they were serving drinks and asked to join them. Tatsuya welcomed her with surprise, noting that she did not usually come by, and Elisa explained she had been working nearby. Elisa politely said that if there was any chance, she would love to join the feast because the food looked delicious. Hearing that, one of the women warmly told Elisa she had a special menu prepared for her, and Elisa reacted with eager excitement. Elisa was thrilled to see that the special dish prepared for her included dragon liver, and the impressive plate immediately caught her attention. Sonia proudly told her that this was a rare delicacy she would not find even in the capital, and urged her to stop hesitating and enjoy it. She then added that they had wine ready as well, leaving Tatsuya visibly surprised by how serious the feast had become. After trying it, Elisa admitted that the flavor was so unusual that even though she had arrived tired and frustrated, those feelings were already fading away. Sonia laughed at Elisa's sudden change in mood, noticing how quickly the meal had won her over. Tatsuya tried to explain that the dish in her hand was dragon liver, making sure she understood what she had just started eating. Sonia quickly reassured him that it was simply from an ordinary dragon and presented it as a completely normal part of the feast. Elisa paused in confusion, clearly unsure how to react to that explanation. A moment later, she looked around in growing surprise, still trying to process the rich flavor and the unusually tense mood at the table. After the meal, Elisa quietly said the room suddenly felt very warm, showing that the intense feast had left her worn out. Tatsuya, alarmed by Elisa's condition, wondered if the dragon liver was affecting her like an unexpectedly strong dish or causing sudden exhaustion. Elisa admitted that, after eating it, she felt unusually overwhelmed and had trouble keeping herself steady. One of the women noticed Elisa seemed overheated after the meal, pointed it out, and suggested she step aside for a short rest. The others kept urging her to accept help, but Elisa hesitated because she was unsure about being guided somewhere quieter to recover. Tatsuya quickly called out to Maria and told everyone not to force the matter, trying to keep the situation from escalating. The women praised Tatsuya, which only made the scene more disorderly and left him awkwardly stuck in the middle. One woman told Tatsuya to stay composed and asked Elisa to come with them so they could sort out the situation together. Tatsuya explained that once Elisa entered that unusual stress state, ordinary attempts to help often did not work, and his tense expression showed how worried he was. He raised his voice and told everyone to wait, making it clear this was not how he wanted to deal with the situation. Flustered, Elisa looked back and quietly asked how they planned to handle her situation. Tatsuya adamantly claimed there was nothing wrong, even though the atmosphere made it obvious the situation had been awkward and stressful. From that day on, something changed, and Elisa stopped trying to pull that kind of prank on them. Later, when Tatsuya called out to her, Elisa was already hurrying away looking embarrassed, and someone commented that she was certainly hard to handle. After that, whenever she came by, she only asked for more archdragon liver instead. Sometime later, a woman called out to Tatsuya-sama and asked for his honest opinion on what she had prepared. Tatsuya told her it suited her well, giving a simple and direct compliment. She thanked him for going out of his way for her, but he brushed it off and told her not to worry about it. Tatsuya awkwardly added that her usual style was so striking that he did not quite know how to react, leaving her puzzled by the comment. Then Tatsuya looked ahead in quiet amazement and realized that it was finally finished. In his hand lay the thing he had long wished for at last, rice. Tatsuya looked over the fields with satisfaction, noting that they now had potatoes, carrots, and at last rice, while wheat meant they could make bread as well. He had also started expanding their food supply by growing fruit. At the same time, the pocket-sized rabbits kept bringing in meat and eggs, so for the moment, food was no longer a major concern. Maria also proved incredibly capable around the settlement, handling laundry, cooking, and nearly every other daily task with ease thanks to her experience as an adventurer. In contrast, Sonia did almost nothing useful, and Tatsuya saw her as a complete freeloader who still kept draining his time and energy afterward. After checking their ingredients and supplies, Tatsuya triumphantly declared that today was the day for katsu curry. The others immediately looked confused, since the only curry they knew came from the pocket-sized rabbits, and they had no idea what katsu curry was. Tatsuya proudly explained that, as far as he knew, curry was one of the most beloved dishes in the world, and he had never met anyone who disliked it. Hearing that, the girls became excited, saying they were curious and could not wait to try it, while Tatsuya promised to make something amazing. As the meal simmered over the fire outside the rustic house, a sudden knock at the door interrupted the cooking. Tatsuya opened the door to find a proud, unfamiliar girl waiting outside, and he immediately realized an unusual visitor had arrived. Maria recognized the newcomer at once and said she had not seen her in a long time, adding that beings from the demon world rarely came here. The visitor bowed respectfully and greeted Maria as Cornelia, showing clear familiarity between them. Tatsuya quietly called to Maria and asked who the small, older-seeming guest really was. Looking tense, Maria explained that this person was one of the 12 demon lords, a powerful figure who avoided demon world politics and lived deep in seclusion near the human border. She then revealed that Cornelia's true form was a dark, evil dragon feared across the world for destructive rampages. Tatsuya, startled by that revelation, asked how someone so dangerous had ended up helping raise crops and manage the pocket-sized rabbit queen. He then reasoned that, rather than truly taming them, the group had probably just let the creatures settle there on their own. Maria agreed and pointed out that even large rabbits would normally be very difficult to control, making their situation highly unusual. Cornelia cut through the discussion and calmly told them to ready their weapons. Cornelia repeated her demand for a weapon, saying she wanted to test this new situation again. Tatsuya reluctantly lifted a broad farming tool and admitted he had no choice but to go along with it. Cornelia stood before him with her arms crossed, sizing him up in silence. After a brief look, she realized he was a man. Maria and the others remarked that powerful people seemed to gather around him, while Tatsuya admitted he still did not really understand it himself. Tatsuya then asked why a demon lord like Cornelia had ended up living in a place like this. Hearing that question, Cornelia's expression suddenly sharpened. She bluntly answered that she was hunting demons, making it clear those reckless creatures were not her allies and that she did not want them causing trouble there. Cornelia added that she had even sent an evil cyclops to deal with one of them, but now another demon had shown up in the yard without even introducing itself. As Maria grew uneasy at Cornelia's intensity, the rabbit queen looked strangely eager for the commotion to escalate. Cornelia and the newly arrived demon locked eyes, and the tension between them rose sharply at once. Tatsuya nervously asked if that meant the demon lord had come there looking for a fight. The demon answered that it had no real desire to fight. Cornelia said she would set the matter aside for now because it was not in her best interest to quarrel. Tatsuya, confused, noted that Cornelia was supposed to be a demon lord while the other one was clearly a powerful fighter. Maria explained that Cornelia only avoided battle when she felt it would waste her strength, though if it could not be avoided, then so be it. She added that when Cornelia chose not to fight, it meant she had recognized the opponent's power and judged the match too, even to guarantee victory. As Tatsuya stood there holding only a hoe and wondering what was happening, Cornelia suddenly caught a scent and focused on something more important. Following that scent, Tatsuya asked if she recognized it. The other girl answered that she did not know it exactly, but somehow the smell felt familiar and nostalgic. Tatsuya served a steaming plate of wild boar katsu curry, explaining the ingredients he had used in the dish. Cornelia cautiously tasted it, and Tatsuya asked if she could really eat it. The moment she tried it, Cornelia lit up and loudly declared that the curry was unbelievably delicious, while Tatsuya was stunned that she enjoyed a Japanese-style meal so much. As the tension from earlier vanished, Cornelia cheerfully remarked that they had nearly started a quarrel, and Tatsuya was surprised by how easygoing she suddenly seemed. Cornelia guessed that someone like Tatsuya must have fed curry to a person from another world before, and she added that curry had long been one of her favorite foods. Tatsuya nervously thought that a single bowl of curry seemed powerful enough to stop a conflict before it began. When he noticed she had left the carrots behind, Tatsuya asked about it, and Cornelia bluntly admitted that she disliked all vegetables, making him react as if she were a child. The Rabbit Queen stepped in with a cheerful laugh, amused by Cornelia's picky eating as Cornelia let out a small protest. Cornelia immediately argued back, and the two of them launched into a quick, noisy bickering match right in front of Tatsuya. In the end, the plate was left completely empty, showing that despite all the complaints, the meal had been fully enjoyed. Cornelia beamed and declared that from now on, she and Tatsuya were allies. As he watched the mood completely turn around, Tatsuya wondered why everyone around him seemed to get used to the food he made so quickly. While heading out, Cornelia cheerfully promised to come back for more curry soon and told Tatsuya to look after things until then. When Tatsuya asked where she lived, Cornelia casually pointed into the distance and said she lived over there. Looking toward the mountains, Tatsuya spotted a huge castle-like building and realized he had never even known something like that was there. Cornelia proudly explained that, as a demon lord, of course she lived in an impressive mansion. With that settled, she raised her voice brightly and moved the conversation along. After Cornelia finally left, the evening passed without further trouble. The next morning, the quiet start to the day was broken by a sudden piece of bad news. As Tatsuya woke up still half asleep, the Rabbit Queen rushed in and warned him that demons were raiding their crops. Tatsuya asked how she could stay so calm, and the Rabbit Queen explained that the raiders had left the carrot fields alone, brushing off his concern. With a tired sigh, Tatsuya grabbed a farming tool and headed straight outside. The explanation was simple. While the rabbit people were away hunting, demons and monsters sometimes raided the fields, and normally the one in charge dealt with it. Tatsuya stepped out holding the tool, only to find several reptilian demons already gathering crops from the field, leaving him at a loss for words. Realizing the situation was serious, Tatsuya asked if they were in trouble, and the Rabbit Queen answered that they definitely were. Looking at the damage, Tatsuya could only stare as the raiders continued taking the harvest, and the Rabbit Queen mourned the loss of their crops. Tatsuya then turned to the Rabbit Queen in surprise and realized that this made her the one in charge of the land. A woman named Ouroboros introduced herself as the aide serving Demon Lord Cornelia. Hearing that, Tatsuya immediately demanded to know why Cornelia's side was raiding his field, while recognizing that Ouroboros was one of the reptilian demons serving her. Ouroboros calmly explained that it was taxation, saying the carrots were so valuable that even the small rabbits prized them, and that selling them to demon nobles would bring wealth comparable to gold dust. Tatsuya stared at her in disbelief, asking what right she had to call this taxation. Ouroboros snapped that this land belonged to Demon Lord Cornelia, so Tatsuya's protest meant nothing to her. Pointing across the fields, she declared that since he had been hunting monsters and using the crops without properly reporting to Cornelia, she would seize all local resources and even take the money inside his cabin. As Tatsuya tried to interrupt, Ouroboros coldly added that he should consider himself lucky because if Cornelia herself had come, he would have been wiped out on the spot. Shocked, Tatsuya said Cornelia had already visited the day before and had even said she planned to return again. Ouroboros burst out laughing and dismissed the idea that Cornelia would ever pay special attention to an ordinary human. Tatsuya insisted it was true, but Ouroboros refused to believe anything like that could happen. Then Tatsuya blurted out the one detail he thought might prove it, saying Cornelia was the only one who could make curry. Even so, Ouroboros called it a pathetic lie, saying she admired his nerve for speaking so boldly without fearing the Demon Lord, and asked if he expected her to cover for him. She immediately changed course and ordered the raiders to rough them up and loot everything before destroying the houses and fields, while Tatsuya gripped his farming tool and the Rabbit Queen stood behind him in alarm. One of the raiders raised its weapon and lunged toward the carrot field to begin the attack. Tatsuya immediately shouted for them to stop. The Rabbit Queen leaped in front of the field and warned that if they touched the carrots, she would not stay quiet. She added with a steady smile that making her angry would be a serious mistake. Ouroboros glared at the Rabbit Queen and mockingly said she seemed eager to throw her life away. At that moment, Cornelia suddenly called out to the group as she emerged from the forest. Ouroboros and the others froze in shock, realizing the demon lord had really come back less than a day later. Cornelia casually explained that she had returned because she wanted to eat katsu curry again that same day. Hearing that, Ouroboros was left completely stunned by how unusual Cornelia's request sounded. Tatsuya then asked Cornelia why Ouroboros and Cyclops had come there and started taking everything under the excuse of taxation. Cornelia looked at Ouroboros and asked if what Tatsuya said was really true. She then demanded to know what Ouroboros' actions were supposed to mean. Ouroboros nervously claimed she had only come to investigate the farmer Tatsuya had reported earlier and meant to teach him a lesson for being rude to Cornelia. Cornelia sharply reminded her that she had sent a letter the day before stating that the lord of the house was her ally and should be treated with the highest respect. Hearing that, Ouroboros fell silent as Cornelia addressed her by name in a cold, disappointed tone. Cornelia repeated Ouroboros' excuse back to her, questioning whether this was really just taxation and a simple lesson. Under Cornelia's pressure, Ouroboros panicked and tried to shift the blame, arguing that the misunderstanding only happened because she had not read the letter properly and could not be expected to understand what it meant. Realizing how badly she had angered Cornelia, Ouroboros broke down and desperately tried to apologize. She immediately fell to the ground and repeatedly apologized to Cornelia for her actions. Watching the scene, Tatsuya dryly clarified that the person Ouroboros had targeted was Cornelia's important friend. Cornelia coldly told Ouroboros that she knew exactly who needed an apology. Ouroboros lowered herself to the ground and deeply apologized for acting without understanding the situation. Cornelia stated that poor communication from subordinates was still the responsibility of their leader, so that excuse would not stand. Cornelia then bowed to Tatsuya as well, sincerely apologizing for Ouroboros' misconduct. The others were shocked to see Cornelia lower her head to Tatsuya, and Ouroboros could only stare in disbelief. When Cornelia asked whether he could forgive them, Tatsuya quickly said there was no need to worry since they had already apologized. Cornelia accepted his response, but said she still could not allow her important ally to lose trust in her support because of this failure. She then called out to Ouroboros, who answered in panic at once. Cornelia ordered Ouroboros to hand over her treasured staff, the evil dragon's rod, immediately, and Ouroboros anxiously asked if she truly meant to go that far. Cornelia calmly replied that such a reaction only showed how important this person was to her. Tatsuya explained that while he did not fully understand it, the one who could make curry was someone precious enough that Cornelia considered him part of what she protected. When Tatsuya asked what she meant, Cornelia simply told him to watch as she raised the evil dragon's rod and began channeling power through it. A massive magic circle spread overhead, filling the area with a powerful, overwhelming light. Tatsuya and the others stared in shock, and one of them realized this was the blessing of the Dragon Emperor. Cornelia confirmed it at once, and added with clear excitement that this was the first time she had ever used the land itself as the target of that power. As the scene shifted to a dragon's horde inside a cavern, the explanation followed that dragons naturally claim treasure after defeating threats and gathering spoils. Tatsuya then understood the result. Within this territory, he had effectively been recognized as Cornelia's treasure, and the area around him was now protected like a dragon's hoard. Cornelia clarified that calling it a blessing was not quite accurate and that it was better understood as a mark. She explained that the giant symbol was proof that her treasure was here, and that anyone causing trouble within its bounds would be treated as if they were challenging her directly. She finished by warning that any demon capable of understanding human language would grasp that meaning immediately, and that demonic beasts would instinctively avoid the place because it carried her lingering magic. Tatsuya summed it up by saying that unless someone was foolish enough to provoke Cornelia, there should be no more trouble within that protected area. Cornelia agreed in principle, though she noted that the warning would not affect ordinary humans, while people of high rank in the sorcerer world would definitely be careful around it, and Tatsuya gratefully realized this should help him avoid future problems. Ouroboros nervously told Tatsuya it was not that simple, explaining that there could only be one mark on a dragon's treasure vault, which meant Cornelia had already given up one of her marks for his sake. Shocked, Tatsuya asked if that was really all right, but Cornelia cheerfully declared that he was her dearest ally and worth the cost. Ouroboros added that Cornelia was also using this decision as a way to keep her subordinates in line. Cornelia then turned the conversation to Ouroboros' earlier misconduct, and Ouroboros bowed her head and said she would accept whatever punishment was decided. Tatsuya immediately stepped in, saying he did not want to make a big issue of it, but also felt he could not simply let the matter end without some kind of resolution. Ouroboros quietly waited while Tatsuya tried to think of a fair answer. Tatsuya finally decided that Ouroboros would stay in the house and help with the household chores for a while, and Cornelia warned her not to take it too far over something so small. Accepting the decision without resistance, Ouroboros softly answered that she would do as Cornelia ordered. Ouroboros thanked Tatsuya for sparing her, praised him as a good person, and eagerly said she wanted to repay him by making something special, starting with morning curry. The scene shifted back to the small house as their conversation continued outside. Tatsuya replied with a tired smile that he was already getting tired of curry, but Ouroboros immediately asked him to wait for one more before leaving. Cornelia bluntly declared that she would not mind eating curry 3 times a day, leaving Tatsuya at a loss. Inside, Ouroboros got to work in the kitchen and cheerfully promised that when the time came, she would make the curry pot Tatsuya had talked about. While she was busy, she heard a noise behind her and turned in confusion, trying to figure out who had come in. She then discovered that Cornelia had left her a spare set of work clothes, which caught her by surprise. Outside, Tatsuya decided to focus on the practical work and planned to grow some Chinese cabbage and onions for the curry pot. But when he looked over the field, he was startled by an unexpected interruption, while Ouroboros quietly watched from behind to see how he would handle the distraction. Ouroboros came out wearing the work clothes Cornelia had prepared and awkwardly asked Tatsuya if they were appropriate for helping out, leaving him momentarily speechless because he had not expected her to change and return so soon. Looking at the clothes Cornelia had prepared, Ouroboros quietly wondered if that meant Tatsuya was now the person she was supposed to answer to in this household. She then stood before him in the outfit and formally said that she would help out from now on, asking him to let her know if the arrangement caused any problems. Tatsuya quickly told her she did not need to push herself if staying there felt awkward, while Ouroboros explained that helping run a residence had been one of her duties at the Demon Lord's mansion and asked to treat the place as a second home. Sitting with his back turned, Tatsuya said that if she wanted to remain there she could, though he added that her current outfit seemed impractical for ordinary housework. When he mentioned experience, Ouroboros honestly replied that she had never handled this specific kind of support work in a private home before. She added that it would be inconvenient if she did not learn the household routine first, since they would now be sharing the same residence. Startled, Tatsuya blurted out that Cornelia could not possibly have arranged something so personal, but Ouroboros calmly clarified that this was her own decision and directly confirmed that Cornelia had not instructed her. She explained that even Cornelia could not make that choice for her, and that deciding to back up Tatsuya while they lived in the same residence was entirely her own initiative. Stepping closer to make her point clearly, Ouroboros said she had not realized it before, but now understood that Tatsuya had remarkable strength and was someone Cornelia respected. As he panicked, Ouroboros declared that, as the second person she answered to in the household hierarchy, he was someone she had judged worthy of her loyalty. Ouroboros continued speaking earnestly and overwhelmed Tatsuya, and when he said everything was happening too fast and that he was just an ordinary man caught up in a situation, she firmly repeated that he had earned her support. With an unsteady voice, Ouroboros asked him directly whether he was turning down her help. Tatsuya immediately denied it and firmly told her that he had nothing against her at all. Later, Tatsuya finally got the chance to take a bath, sinking into the water with overwhelming relief and thinking it felt like paradise. Even though the bath was basically a large wooden tub set into the ground, he felt as if he had stepped into an old country house and found a proper bathhouse. Since heating enough water was difficult, he had ordered several large metal pots and mixed boiled water with cold water to fill the tub. As he relaxed, he admitted that building a proper water system in the future would take a lot of work. He reflected that ever since arriving there, he had only been washing with river water, so a real bath felt especially restorative despite the initial chill. While rinsing off, Tatsuya thought that a bath really did help a worn-out body, and that his exhaustion came not only from farm work, but also from the stress of everything that had happened earlier. His mind drifted back to the 3 women from earlier, and he concluded that if they pulled him into that kind of overwhelming commotion again, even the Emperor of the Night skill might not be enough to keep him on his feet. Tatsuya recalled the harsh events he had endured so far, from dangerous food to difficult battles and repeated shocks that had pushed him to his limit. Resting in the bath, he admitted that despite everything, this kind of comfort made the struggle feel worthwhile. As he relaxed, he looked up at the sky and quietly noticed that this world had 2 moons. He remembered hearing about the red moon before, but seeing another ordinary moon beside it left him wondering how this world's celestial cycles worked. Tatsuya reflected that he had never really taken the time to simply gaze at the night sky like this. His thoughts drifted back over everything since arriving there, including rough meals, constant interruptions from the women around him, and even facing a demon lord. Even so, He recognized that life was finally becoming more stable, with food secured, supplies available through Alice, and everyday living gradually falling into place. Looking ahead, Tatsuya told himself that after surviving all of that, he could manage life here somehow. Seeing the simple bath beside the rustic house, he felt relieved and thought that the people living with him had made this new life surprisingly warm and pleasant. Just then, one of the women called out cheerfully that she would be the next to check the bath. As Tatsuya realized someone was about to use the bath for the first time, he hurriedly told her to wait a moment so he could make sure it was ready and safe. The rabbit-eared woman answered cheerfully and said she had a present for him. She was surprised when Tatsuya showed her the bath products, and he asked if the gift had caught her off guard. After trying them, she lit up with excitement and praised how smooth her hair felt. The others looked on as Tatsuya pointed out that the result was impressive, and she enthusiastically agreed. Holding the bottle tightly, she asked in amazement what the item was. Tatsuya explained that one bottle was shampoo, another was conditioner, and the third was body soap. He then reflected that in this world, people usually washed with only water, or at most wiped themselves down with a warm towel. So to everyone there, products like shampoo, conditioner, and body soap were completely unfamiliar. Tatsuya realized that because the rabbit-eared women already had very straight hair, the new cleaning products made the improvement especially easy to notice, and they were thrilled with the results. Pleased by how smooth her hair had become, the rabbit-eared woman hurried over to Tatsuya to thank him, and he froze in surprise at her sudden excitement over the new hygiene supplies. Tatsuya awkwardly accepted her thanks, while privately noticing that the soaps and shampoos left a much stronger clean scent in this world than he expected. Just then, another woman stepped forward and called out to Tatsuya to get his attention. Crossing her arms and looking straight at him, she firmly said that she wanted a chance to test the treatment products as well. Tatsuya looked up in confusion, and she bluntly reminded him that she was part of the group too and deserved the same chance. She quickly agreed to the plan and moved ahead without hesitation. Holding the bottle in front of her face, she admitted that she had no idea how to use it properly. Still uncertain, she wondered aloud whether the product would really work. After trying it, she fell silent and touched her hair in surprise, clearly noticing the difference. Watching her reaction, Tatsuya realized she was waiting for his opinion on the result. When Tatsuya told her that the result looked wonderful, she jolted in surprise and stared back at him, clearly caught off guard by the compliment. Nearby, another woman watched the exchange and quietly called out to Tatsuya for permission. Bowing politely, she asked if this Ouroboros member could also be allowed to use the treatment products. Tatsuya asked why she was so concerned, and she answered with unusual seriousness that this was a contest she could not afford to lose. He agreed at once and told everyone not to keep the products to themselves. Holding the bottle and looking at the others, she admitted that she had never seen anyone style their hair quite like this and asked how she should use it. As she watched the process more closely, she quickly figured out how the product was dispensed and what she needed to do. A little flustered, she began working through her hair on her own. After finishing, she straightened up, now noticeably more composed as she checked the result. Then, with her face slightly red from embarrassment, she thanked Tatsuya and openly told him that his help had left a strong impression on her. Looking at the group, Tatsuya quietly realized how striking the team seemed when gathered together like this. As he looked them over, he could not help thinking that an unusually capable group had assembled there. Before long, the three turned their attention to him and openly waited for his opinion on how their preparation had turned out. Tatsuya addressed all of them at once and told them they had all done an excellent job, leaving the whole group briefly surprised and embarrassed. One of them then stepped closer and nervously called out to Tatsuya, asking him to take a closer look at her work. She asked how her choice of scent came across as part of the presentation, and Tatsuya quickly assured her that it suited the effort well. Not wanting to be left out, another member immediately asked him to evaluate the overall impression she had prepared as well. In an instant, the others gathered around too, each asking Tatsuya to recognize her work, and he was overwhelmed by the sudden rush of requests. With everyone talking over one another and demanding his verdict, the scene turned into complete chaos as the evening wore on. By the end of it, the entire group had fallen into exhausted silence. Tatsuya was stunned when he learned that Elisa's mother was seriously ill. It was explained that she had urgently needed money for medical treatment, and Tatsuya realized that if he had known from the start, he would have cooperated. He added that she had already returned the money, managed the books well, and was even earning commissions through recent transactions, while another voice cheerfully called for him to take a look. When Tatsuya turned his attention over, he froze in disbelief at what looked like a towering pile of carrots. In front of him stood an enormous mountain of carrots, and the others admired the unbelievable result with delight. One of the girls happily declared that this was exactly the carrot harvest they had been hoping for and invited the others to jump in with her. Still excited, she then realized there was far too much for them to eat alone and suggested they should sell some of it. But another immediately objected with all her might, insisting that she did not want to sell the carrots. Tatsuya calmly pointed out that the current offer was unfair, but if they secured a steady source of supply, Ouroboros had said the carrots could soon be sold at a premium. To persuade her, he suggested treating it as a one-time investment and promised that once the sales money came in, he would prepare a hearty carrot stew for everyone. As soon as he mentioned making white stew with the carrots, she immediately showed interest, and the others realized she had finally been convinced. He quickly explained that carrot stew paired surprisingly well with the harvest, almost as well as curry, and assured her it would be worth it. Hearing that promise, she lit up with excitement and looked completely won over by the idea. Even so, she hesitantly asked if they could sell only the extra carrots and keep the rest for themselves, and he readily agreed. Tatsuya then decided they should use Cornelia's connections through Ouroboros to sell the carrots in the demon world, where the price would be far better. Maria accepted his instructions with formal politeness and prepared to help with the plan. Cornelia suggested that they head to Lady Cornelia's castle that evening to move the negotiations forward, and Tatsuya agreed at once. Tatsuya then said he had other matters to handle at home and asked Maria to take care of things there, noting to himself how dependable she had become. It was said that after coming to his home, Maria had taken on nearly all the household chores with great responsibility. Thanks to no longer needing to handle the chores alone, the others became more productive around the farm, as Maria steadily helped keep everything running smoothly. It was said that Maria always gave her full effort whenever she worked. After gaining the strength of a dragon and becoming a berserk rabbit, everyday common sense no longer seemed to apply to her. Even so, Maria still hesitated and tried to raise one more concern to her employer. She explained that ordinary merchants trading in the demon world normally had to pay tariffs, though their group was exempt because of Lady Cornelia's protection. She added that trade restrictions between the human and demon worlds were strict, and many officials were always watching for chances to collect border fees. Because of that, she warned that they could easily lose more than half their earnings. Tatsuya understood the problem and admitted that under normal circumstances the deal would feel like a ripoff, though he was willing to accept it for now. He then asked whether they should temporarily unload the carrots in a human town instead. Maria immediately started to object again, still carefully trying to point out the risk in his plan. She reminded him once more that regular traders would be charged heavily, and only their connection to Lady Cornelia allowed them to avoid those service fees. Maria explained that trade between the human and demon worlds was tightly restricted, and officials in many places constantly watched for chances to collect border tariffs. She warned that because of those fees, it was easy to lose more than half of the profits. Tatsuya understood and admitted that under normal circumstances, the arrangement really did feel like a bad deal, though he was willing to accept it for now. He then asked whether they should unload the carrots in a human town for the time being. Before Maria could continue her objection, another voice suddenly cut in, declaring that they had already heard the whole issue. Tatsuya turned in surprise as Elisa joined the discussion, and Maria insisted that the real point was the profitable opportunity they were overlooking. Elisa carefully said that commerce was not her specialty, but she remembered that these carrots had already been discussed as goods that could sell for high prices. Maria immediately confirmed it and said that, to be exact, all of Tatsuya's vegetables had strong sales potential, even bringing up the sweeter experimental cherry tomatoes from before. She went on to explain that with her crop improvement skill, she could freely adjust qualities like sweetness, fiber content, firmness, and texture. Maria concluded that because high-quality ingredients were so scarce, their market value could rise to the level of gold depending on how negotiations with the nobles went. Elisa excitedly asked if that meant they could handle selling all of Tatsuya's vegetables next time, and Tatsuya admitted the idea did sound impressive. Even so, Tatsuya quickly rejected it, saying that approach would never work and would only create more trouble for them. Maria pointed out that materials from monsters were difficult to transport, and Tatsuya wondered if the forest might count as a highly dangerous dungeon where wealthy adventurers could be hired as escorts, making his various ideas more like rough profit estimates than a real plan. Maria reminded him that his idea was risky because it depended on someone who had already taken advantage of them before, and she complained that he had said he would stop bringing up that person. Tatsuya then tried to solve both problems at once by asking how they could avoid middlemen in the demon world, while also escaping extra distribution costs in the human world. Elisa quietly suggested a new direction, asking whether selling the vegetables directly to the Elven tribes might be an option. Hearing that, Maria immediately lit up and declared that this was exactly the answer they needed. Maria explained that the elven tribes were vegetarians and would likely buy Tatsuya's produce even at very high prices, especially since they had already saved plenty of money by selling expensive magical tools to humans. Another concern was raised that elves usually kept to themselves, lived only among other elves, and avoided unnecessary contact with both humans and demons, so it was uncertain whether any tribe would openly trade or agree to establish a route with them. Maria confidently answered that the key to negotiations would be simple, winning them over with the taste of Tatsuya's vegetables. Tatsuya asked if that meant she wanted him to handle the negotiations, and she immediately confirmed it. Maria pointed out that there were still reckless nobles in the demon world, even among people connected to their own side. Elisa bluntly remarked that, in that case, she seemed to be the only one thinking cautiously. Tatsuya admitted he still did not understand much about this world, then said he would leave the negotiations to her. Elisa answered with full confidence, telling him he could count on her. Even while promising to take a commission, Elisa insisted she would not cheat him again and said he must have learned from the past. The next day, the group headed out through the forest while one of them stayed behind to watch the house. As they walked, one companion called it a simple outing, another asked whether they would snack on the carrots, and Maria reported that a wild boar had been spotted and asked if they should hunt it. Another member cheerfully declared that today they were taking a break from hunting. Watching the others head off so energetically, Tatsuya noted that they seemed far less tense than usual. Sonia told Tatsuya they had arrived and urged him to take a look. The group came upon a heavily fortified settlement hidden within the forest, with barriers and a guarded gate protecting the village inside. Tatsuya was struck by the sight, while Maria observed that even though it was called a village, it looked more like a fortress, and Sonia added that elves were a cautious people. An elf suddenly raised the alarm, shouting that pocket rabbits were charging in groups and declaring an enemy raid. The village erupted into frantic activity as orders rang out to hide everything, especially the carrots, and prepare to intercept the intruders. Confused by the panic, Tatsuya asked Sonia what his group had done to make the elves react like this. Sonia explained that the elves referred to them as the chibi gang of the forest. Tatsuya could only stand there in baffled silence as the explanation sank in. Sonia cheerfully revealed that the elves treasured carrots because they were brought as gifts when children reached an important ceremony, and Tatsuya immediately realized his group had effectively been seen as carrot thieves. Inside the village, a crowd of elves gathered together, making it clear that the visitors had drawn the full attention of the settlement. Tatsuya broke into a cold sweat and realized he had completely misjudged the situation. He remembered too late that the forest creatures were harmless in appearance, but infamous among the elves for raiding food supplies. On top of the settlement, a group of elves raised their hands as a large magical circle began forming overhead. Startled, Tatsuya pointed upward and asked Maria what exactly they were looking at. The spell intensified, swirling into a massive formation above the village as the elves continued their ritual. Maria panicked and warned him that a ritual attack spell was about to be unleashed. The enormous magical blast roared forward and slammed into the area with overwhelming force, shaking the defenses around them. Tatsuya and the others could only stare in shock as the attack rained down from the fortress wall. In a panic, Tatsuya protested that he had only come there to negotiate. Still reeling from the sudden assault, he shouted in disbelief and demanded to know why this was happening to him. As the pressure closed in around him, Tatsuya tested his movements and realized something strange was happening, because his body felt unusually easy to control while his mind raced to understand it. In the next instant, he turned in surprise and noticed that his body now felt much lighter than before. Nearby, the beast-eared fighters exchanged rapid blows, their movements sharp and powerful as the clash unfolded at high speed. One of the women rushed forward with her weapon ready, keeping her focus on the fight despite the tension on her face. Tatsuya looked at Sonia in surprise and admitted that she was stronger than he expected, while she calmly told him that anyone wandering a forest aimlessly should at least be able to defend themselves and gather materials. As he stood with a farm tool in hand, Tatsuya focused on the real problem in front of them, while the ominous magical force continued building nearby. Maria urgently warned Tatsuya that nearly a dozen elf spellcasters were preparing a ritual attack, and even she and Sonia would struggle to withstand it directly. Tatsuya paused, thought it over, and calmly told Maria not to worry yet. Looking up at the swirling magic, Tatsuya began to suspect that his farming-related skills might somehow be affecting the situation. Then his expression changed completely as he realized the massive spell overhead had suddenly vanished. Tatsuya realized in shock that his farming and tool-related abilities had somehow erased the high-level ritual magic, leaving the onlookers stunned into silence. The elf women quickly understood that the enormous ritual spell had been neutralized by an ordinary work tool, and they could hardly believe what they were seeing. The group crowded around Tatsuya in amazement, praising him as he awkwardly processed that his strange abilities had protected everyone from harm. The rabbit-eared women became wildly excited, calling him a legendary hero and declaring their support, while one of them bluntly criticized the elves' recklessness. Tatsuya immediately rejected the praise and pointed out that the entire disaster had started because of the people around him. When one of the rabbit-eared women complained after being brushed aside, Tatsuya turned back with an awkward, slightly concerned look. At that moment, a dignified elf woman appeared at the settlement entrance, and the mood shifted as the others instantly recognized her presence as a serious threat. Tatsuya stared at the newly arrived elf woman in alarm, while someone beside him quietly warned that her appearance meant real trouble. The rabbit-eared woman panicked at once, saying they had already gone too far and begging their captain for permission to retreat before things got worse. Facing them with calm authority, the elf woman sternly addressed the rabbit-eared group, making it clear she was taking control of the situation. The elf captain calmly said she would allow them to act, but her tone made it clear there was a condition. With a sharp, intimidating stare, she clarified that the only permission she was giving was permission to fight. The rabbit-eared women immediately panicked, crying out that she was a demon as the pressure from her presence overwhelmed them. They frantically explained that she was descended from a demon sergeant, making the situation feel impossible and even worse in their eyes. Seeing how desperate they were to flee, Tatsuya dryly pointed out that they seemed more interested in running away than standing their ground. One of the rabbit-eared women admitted that even if Cornelia looked graceful, that did nothing to make the situation any less frightening. Tatsuya then asked, clearly confused, why this conflict had even started at all, unless it somehow involved carrots, since they seemed strangely obsessed with them. A rabbit-eared woman seriously explained that the elf in question was also devoted to vegetables, especially carrots. The full story came out as they explained that while they had once been away from home, that elf led an army that raided their den and stole their carrots, while Tatsuya cut in disbelief to ask whether they had not started the stealing first. Putting a hand to his head, Tatsuya muttered that if that harsh-looking elf really was involved, he could not understand why they would break into such a dangerous place just to steal in the first place. One of the rabbit-eared women suddenly shouted that she remembered everything at last. The group burst into angry complaints, insisting the elf had stolen their carrots and that their despair at the time had driven them to think only of revenge. Tatsuya realized the whole situation had changed as the rabbit-eared women fired themselves up with reckless threats and exaggerated confidence. Watching them switch into a rough local dialect, Tatsuya asked why they had suddenly started talking like that, while the others looked puzzled by the harsh language. Tatsuya summed it up by saying that both sides simply seemed to have a weakness for vegetables. One of the women explained that although they liked to mock Sonia and the others, the elf side had acted to protect food supplies because preserving vegetables was directly tied to their family's survival. The narration framed the conflict in grand terms, describing a rabbit-controlling queen, a noble from the demon world, and a mysterious man carrying farm tools. Tatsuya again pointed out their sudden shift into rough dialect, while the others remained confused by how intense their language had become. He repeated his conclusion that, in the end, both parties were driven by the same obsession with vegetables. The explanation continued that the elf was not foolish, and that the raid had been a desperate last resort to secure food for her people by mobilizing their forces. The narration grandly summed up the opposing sides as a queen who commanded small rabbits, a noble from the demon world, and a mysterious man who fought with farm tools. The elf concluded that if she could remove the demon queen Cornelia and deal with the mysterious man, her side would gain overwhelming power. She reasoned that once the rabbit queen and her followers were dealt with, and with the noble from another world gone as well, her homeland's military strength would finally stand on equal footing. Tatsuya quietly listened as she confidently judged that the others had no chance of winning. In Tatsuya's mind, he calmly sorted out the enemy's strength and concluded that the gap between each side was so huge, it was basically an unbreakable wall. Accepting her fate, the elf proposed a one-on-one duel against the other side's strongest military leader, saying that if death was unavoidable, she wanted to fall as a warrior. Tatsuya's inner assessment of the battlefield did not change, and he remained convinced that the difference in strength between the two camps was absolute. Facing the group from a distance, the elf formally repeated her demand for a single combat match with their greatest commander. She declared that anyone who called themselves a warrior should understand her pride and the dignity behind that challenge. Tatsuya forced an awkward smile, thinking that he was really just a farmer and had no idea how to answer that without making things worse. The elf angrily rejected Tatsuya's rough choice of words, insisting the fight was about her own life and pride, not farming. Tatsuya quickly tried to stomp the clash, shouting that he wanted to talk and that they had not come there to fight in the first place. The elf refused to back down, saying that once the conflict had begun, she believed it would only end through a decisive battle. With the farming tool held upright in front of him, Tatsuya nervously admitted he was unsure, while the elf declared that if she won, he would have to listen to her terms. The elf launched her attack at once, declaring that there was no point worrying about what came after defeat when victory had not yet been secured. Tatsuya was startled when he realized she had fired 4 arrows in a single shot. In an instant, the arrows were already aimed at his head, torso, and leg, and even while recognizing her skill, he judged her attack too straightforward. As Tatsuya prepared a finishing counterattack from above, the elf calmly read his plan and concluded he would try to end it by closing the distance in one leap. Tatsuya answered her prediction by calling her the naive one and unleashing a technique he named Green Holy Flare. He swung his farming tool and released a massive, curved wave of power, forcing the battle into a sudden new phase. The women watching from the side went pale and shouted in alarm, realizing Tatsuya was in serious danger. One of them urgently explained that the area was surrounded by an ancient ritual barrier built by the elves over many decades, so powerful that even a demon king could not break free from it. Hearing that, Tatsuya froze in shock as he realized the attack was drawing on the strength of the entire village. He judged that a direct hit would end the fight immediately, but his instincts also warned him that there was no time left to dodge. As the blast closed in, Tatsuya admitted to himself that he would not be able to avoid it in time. At that exact moment, a sudden light flared around him as his farmwork skill reached level 10 and activated. The onlookers stared in confusion, while the nearby villagers also turned their attention toward the strange change happening around him. Tatsuya felt an overwhelming force surge through his entire body, leaving even him stunned by its intensity. The elf could hardly believe what she was seeing, shouting that his movements made no sense and demanding to know what he really was. As Tatsuya rushed forward with his farming tool in hand, the elf watched in shaken disbelief and began to question whether true strength meant accepting everything without letting pride get in the way. The elf sank into despair and declared that her defeat was complete, asking Tatsuya to finish her. Tatsuya lowered his gaze and calmly said that their true goal had only been to face her. He explained that he had come there to build a deeper friendship, leaving her stunned by the word itself. The elf rejected his claim at once, saying she could not trust kind words from someone she still saw as an enemy. Tatsuya awkwardly tried to make peace by offering her a carrot as a sign of friendship, but she misunderstood his intentions and became even angrier until later, after things settled down, she admitted that if he had simply said from the start that he wanted to trade vegetables, none of it would have happened. That only made her even more furious, and she called his words outrageous while threatening him in anger. Panicking, the elf completely misread his purpose, and Tatsuya realized that a simple attempt to talk had turned into a serious misunderstanding. Later, after things calmed down, she drank heavily and complained that if he had said from the start that he wanted to trade vegetables, the whole conflict could have been avoided. The atmosphere soon turned cheerful as everyone shared food and drink, praised Tatsuya's vegetables and sake, and agreed to move on from the dispute. Watching the lively feast, Tatsuya was astonished to realize that even after all that drinking, the elves still ate nothing but vegetables. As the queen sampled the meal and sake, she admitted that the carrots were good, but declared the cherry tomatoes the best. Tatsuya explained that the elves usually specialized in making and exporting magic armor and artifacts rather than farming, and he noted that the queen became much friendlier once she finally tasted his carrots. He went on to explain that securing a stable food supply had always been one of the elves' biggest problems, since fresh vegetables were hard to transport so close to the forest of no return. After calming down, the queen asked him an important question, wondering how he managed to grow so many different kinds of vegetables. Tatsuya awkwardly replied that it was a trade secret, and the queen remarked that, considering how delicious they were, she could understand why he would keep that knowledge hidden. She then reasoned that since they had been at war only moments earlier, there was no need for him to reveal everything, especially if his farming skill was truly that rare. Tatsuya thanked her for liking the vegetables, then carefully said there was something else he wanted her to try. He presented another dish and asked if she would taste it next, leaving the queen puzzled as she looked at the unfamiliar food. When she picked it up with her chopsticks, she hesitated, confused by its strange texture and wondering whether it was really edible at all. The moment she started to guess what the ingredient might be, Tatsuya quickly urged her to keep trying it, and the queen remained flustered as the conversation turned awkward again. Tatsuya offered the strange dish to her directly, and the queen reluctantly tasted it while bracing herself for something unusual. The moment the flavor hit her, the queen threw her head back in shock and loudly demanded to know what she had just eaten. Then her disbelief turned into amazement as she declared that she had never tasted anything so delicious before. Tatsuya showed her the sauce and explained that it was called mayonnaise, leaving her even more curious about this unfamiliar seasoning. He told her it was a secret recipe from the human world and assured her that she would understand its appeal once she saw how much people loved it. Tatsuya added that he would also make sure no one from his side tried to steal from the elves again. But the queen told him that would not be necessary, saying that after trying his cooking, they no longer needed to depend on the elves' food stores. As evening approached and their business concluded, the queen openly praised the meal, saying it was so good she would never get tired of eating it. She then stepped closer with a stern, exhausted look, catching Tatsuya completely off guard as if she were about to confront him over something important. Around them, the feast had ended in total disorder, and with people slumped over from exhaustion and drink, someone awkwardly questioned whether anyone was really fit to leave in that condition. The queen suddenly addressed Tatsuya directly about rumors of his unusual strength, leaving him unsure why she was questioning his stamina and reliability at that moment. She pressed the issue and bluntly repeated what she had heard from the three others, making Tatsuya freeze at how abruptly she raised the concern. Looking around at the banquet aftermath and the people sprawled out from too much food and drink, Tatsuya awkwardly asked why she was raising such a serious suspicion so openly. The queen paused, touched her temple as she pieced the scene together, and Tatsuya immediately sensed that she had reached a troubling misunderstanding. Surrounded by the elf women, Tatsuya realized they suspected he might exploit the ongoing chaos and his strength to stir up trouble, which had created tension and mistrust. The others then explained the real situation, saying there were no men left among the elves. With a serious expression, the queen added that their people could only continue as a community with help from other races. Hearing that, Tatsuya panicked and struggled to understand what responsibility they were about to place on him. The queen urgently explained that her people needed cooperation from outsiders and asked Tatsuya to stay with them, but he immediately refused. Flustered but trying to stay rational, Tatsuya told them to calm down and said they should first build trust and understand each other better since they had only just met. One of the elves proudly told Tatsuya that 10 of them lived in the village and asked whether even that many capable residents was still not enough to convince him to stay and help support their community. Tatsuya immediately shouted back that he was not against the proposal itself. From that point on, his daily life there changed dramatically. The elf village had strength in both numbers and individual combat ability, and Tatsuya later admitted that without his support skill, he might not have survived working alongside them. Before long, a quiet rural routine took shape around the small house where he stayed. At night, Tatsuya soaked in an outdoor bath beside the house and let out a relieved sigh, thinking that this kind of peace felt wonderful. Exhausted from another long day of farm work, he quietly reflected while washing up outside under the night sky. He felt that this life might actually be better than the one he had left behind in Japan, with good food, a warm place to clean up, and kind company around him. Even so, he knew that just beyond the village was dangerous territory filled with demons, so he remained grateful for the unusual skills he had gained after being transported to this world. Just then, several elves cheerfully arrived saying they needed to wash up as well, crowding the area and ending Tatsuya's brief moment of solitude. The elves gathered near the house and explained that while they had come to check the vegetables and buy supplies, they also hoped to wash up before heading back. Before he knew it, Tatsuya's quiet cleanup time had turned into a noisy logistical mess, and the outdoor tub was accidentally broken. Boxed in on all sides by the energetic elves, Tatsuya was completely overwhelmed by their chaotic enthusiasm. Under the night sky, his confused shouts were lost in the commotion. A little later, Tatsuya stared in disbelief as he took in that the bath had been broken. One of the elves admitted that the damage had happened because of Sonya's recklessness. Frustrated, Tatsuya said that bathing had been one of the great comforts of daily life, and without it, he would not want to stay there for long, while one elf asked what could be done. He then added that if they were going to remain a larger group, they needed more than a bath and should start thinking about building a proper house. Hearing that, one of the elves immediately brightened and declared that she knew exactly what to do. Tatsuya looked back in surprise as she said that if he wanted a proper house, they would need to bring in craftsmen even to this remote place. Tatsuya agreed and said they would need some help, along with other people to handle smaller tasks. The explanation continued that because the area was a dangerous remote region, they would need many workers and even capable adventurers to escort them, which would make the project expensive from the start. Hearing that they would need 15 to 30 skilled adventurers and artisans for weeks in such a place, At normal rates, Tatsuya grimly realized he had heard this kind of cost estimate before. When he asked how much it would be, the others paused and started calculating the total. The answer came back that even without material costs, it would still take about 4,000 gold coins, leaving everyone stunned. Tatsuya admitted this was far too difficult, and the others noted that the money box was already draining everything he earned, even with how self-sufficient they had become. Looking at the situation, one of the elves bluntly said they were in serious trouble, and Tatsuya could only react in dismay. Then the elven queen calmly offered to send 10 of her people and said he could simply pay them whatever seemed like fair wages. Before Tatsuya could accept, another elf pointed out that traditional elven construction relied heavily on living trees, which might not suit him at all. As Tatsuya pictured the elven village with its tree-built homes, he admitted it had a wonderful fantasy atmosphere, but only as a temporary experience. Tatsuya said that kind of tree-based elven home would not be comfortable for him to live in permanently, and the others accepted that. One elf then suggested speaking with the dwarves instead, and Tatsuya immediately pictured the classic fantasy image of dwarf craftsmen. The next day, they left the rough cabin to follow up on that new idea. They arrived at a dwarf village located near the elven settlement. There, the dwarf chieftain thanked the queen for coming so far, but explained that the village was currently short on labor. The elf earnestly asked the chieftain to help them somehow, despite the shortage. Inside, as everyone sat together to talk, she appealed to the long relationship between their peoples, while Tatsuya and the others listened. The discussion revealed that the dwarf village was currently occupied with producing weapons and armor because war was close to breaking out in neighboring countries. It was explained that the elves and dwarves were rare neighboring races with a good relationship, with dwarven goods being purchased by the elves and then enhanced through enchantment. They also noted that dwarves come of age differently, with both men and women suddenly growing beards once they reach a certain age. As they looked around the dwarf village, it became clear that almost no one looked close to Tatsuya's age, with most residents appearing either much younger or much older by human standards. Tatsuya quietly concluded that this visit probably would not lead to the kind of ideal outcome the others had imagined, and he tried to brush it off by focusing on the tea. Then the elf suddenly remembered that the dwarf chieftain had a granddaughter. She immediately asked whether that granddaughter could help, reasoning that even if weapon making was still beyond her, carpentry skills might still make her suitable for work on Tatsuya's house. With surprising enthusiasm, the elf asked to have the granddaughter assist for a couple of weeks, and the chieftain hesitated at the scope of the request. Tatsuya tried to calm her down, but she insisted that this was all for the sake of his future home. From the side, a small voice asked her grandfather for permission to go, causing everyone at the table to turn toward the speaker. The granddaughter stepped into view, and it was explained that while she had not fully matured by dwarf standards, her craftsmanship was already at a professional level. Nervously but earnestly, the granddaughter asked once more for permission to join the week-long trip. The chieftain immediately rejected the idea, and Tatsuya was left startled that she had already appeared before them. The chieftain firmly refused, saying she was still only half-grown and would not be allowed to leave the village. The elf kept pressing the issue, arguing that the trip would only take about a week and promising fair payment, while Tatsuya awkwardly pointed out that he was not even the one paying for it. The chieftain stood his ground and explained that, no matter what the queen requested, the village law did not allow those who were still in training to go. Hearing that, the elf asked what a dwarf had to do in order to be recognized as a full adult. It was then explained that a true master had to personally gather a special ore from the mines and forge a single weapon from it with their own hands. The elf immediately questioned why the granddaughter had not already gone to mine the ore, since she was apparently skilled enough in her craft. The answer was that she was supposed to make that journey on her birthday the previous month, but the war in a neighboring land had made it impossible to arrange an escort on short notice. The chieftain clarified that the mine was a massive dungeon, and that the village men normally searched it while protecting the younger dwarves who were still in training. The elf instantly seized on that point and asked if all the girl needed, then, was an escort, leaving Tatsuya caught off guard by how quickly she reached that conclusion. Before long, the group headed toward the mining cave, moving into the tunnel as the plan shifted toward helping her complete the trial. As they moved through the mine tunnel, two rabbit-like creatures suddenly rushed past at incredible speed, startling the group. Tatsuya calmly explained that there was a cliff ahead, and that they were heading in that direction, while the others thanked him for guiding them. Watching the creatures dart around the tunnel, Tatsuya heard that they were rabbits with excellent night vision, and he could only wonder what kind of place they had walked into. He then explained that those creatures were known as pocket rabbits. Hearing the name, the young dwarf repeated it in surprise. One of the girls was so shaken by the explanation that she collapsed to the ground, and the others treated her reaction as completely typical. The conversation then shifted as someone brought up an adamantite ore monster. The dwarf confirmed that defeating that monster was exactly the goal. When Tatsuya assumed they planned to defeat it and collect the ore, the dwarf quickly corrected him and explained that special ore was not mined directly but obtained in a different way, while adamantite itself was extremely rare in ordinary mines. Tatsuya then realized the trial was not simply about sharing ore, but about proving oneself worthy of being recognized as a full adult. The dwarf girl explained that the ore monster absorbed metals with magical properties into its own body, and in return they could obtain ore from it. Tatsuya was confused by the idea, then realized the magical power supplied to his sword's core could become fuel or reinforce it directly. The dwarf casually remarked that this kind of exchange arrangement had existed since ancient times, and Tatsuya could only accept that customs differed from place to place. When the discussion turned to food, the dwarf reacted with surprise and admitted that, for some reason, the smell was incredibly appealing. Tatsuya noticed she did not even know what curry was, while the others happily encouraged her and promised she would be surprised. He prepared a simple meal of instant curry and white rice for everyone. The dwarf hesitated and looked wary of the unfamiliar dish, but Tatsuya reassured her that it was perfectly safe. The moment she tried a bite, her eyes went wide as the rich flavor completely caught her off guard. She declared it the most delicious thing she had ever eaten, while Tatsuya looked on as if it were no big deal. Seeing her reaction, Tatsuya simply asked if she wanted another serving. The dwarf girl smiled brightly and answered without hesitation that she definitely wanted another serving. After the meal, the group settled down around the campfire, and Tatsuya wished everyone good night. Later, two companions approached Tatsuya and asked him to continue their usual evening planning routine for the night watch. When two companions approached Tatsuya for their usual evening planning routine, the unexpected interruption surprised the dwarf girl and changed the group's mood. Tatsuya immediately worried that the situation might be misunderstood in front of the younger members of the group. The dwarf girl stared in stunned confusion while the camp grew quiet around them. The next morning, Tatsuya woke up slowly and greeted everyone with a sleepy good morning. Still puzzled, the dwarf girl asked Katya why they always went over watch duties together before going to sleep. Tatsuya awkwardly admitted that being asked so bluntly about their nightly routine caught him off guard and embarrassed him. Katya calmly explained that it was simply their normal way of coordinating the night watch and the next morning's plans, which left Tatsuya unsure what to say. Nervously, the dwarf girl swallowed and commented that the group seemed to be working together well. Tatsuya, flustered, admitted that he did not really know how to respond, and Haruya quietly said she was unsure how to phrase it too. Holding his cup in surprise, Tatsuya heard her say that she was interested in building that kind of reliable teamwork as well. She explained that there were few children in dwarf villages, so she had not had many chances to get to know people her own age. Looking straight at him, Haruya explained that this was why she hoped to find someone she could truly trust and work well with on important forge work. Tatsuya, confused by her hesitant words, tried to figure out what point she was about to make about their working relationship. She suddenly blurted out that she'd stayed awake waiting for him because she wanted to speak with him first thing in the morning, leaving Tatsuya scrambling to calm the tense moment. Completely caught off guard, Tatsuya asked her to slow down and explain clearly what she really meant. Flustered, she clarified that among dwarves, blacksmithing was their calling, and they had an instinctive sense for whether a man was responsible enough to be entrusted with one of their weapons. Sitting across from him, she finally explained that this was probably why the girls around him seemed so quick to trust his judgment and rely on his help. Haruya admitted she was too worked up to sleep and said she wished she had someone dependable in her life she could count on during difficult times. Tatsuya, unable to make sense of her sudden personal remark, could only respond with an awkward apology. Haruya grew flustered and insisted that Tatsuya had completely misunderstood what she was trying to say. Trying to move past the awkward mix-up, she said she did not really know him well enough to keep talking so casually and was just going to sleep. Tatsuya hurried to clear things up, reminding her that they were about to leave soon. Before they could resolve it, a monster suddenly charged down the passage, and another girl immediately urged everyone to act. The rabbit-eared fighters launched a fierce counterattack, overwhelming the creature with chaotic confidence as they shouted over one another. Watching the swift takedown, Tatsuya praised the nearby girls for leading the way so effectively, while Haruya looked on in surprise. Then one of the girls pointed into the distance, drawing everyone's attention to something else nearby. As they looked closer, the group realized they had found wild boars unlike anything they had seen before, and some of the girls excitedly wondered whether this was a new species and whether it was good to eat. Before anyone could stop them, the rabbit-eared girls rushed ahead at full speed, shouting that they were going after it while Tatsuya called after them to wait. Watching them charge off, Tatsuya could only sigh that they were as wild as ever, while Haria reacted in disbelief. One of the girls then pointed out that they were already close to their destination, drawing everyone's attention deeper into the passage. The group suddenly came face to face with a gigantic crystalline figure embedded in the cavern, its presence towering over them. The crystal being declared itself to be the Adamantite King. Stunned, Tatsuya questioned what he was hearing, and one of the girls quickly reminded everyone that she was the granddaughter of a dwarf chieftain. The Adamantite King announced that, in accordance with an ancient covenant, it wished to hand over its adamantite. Hearing that, the girl immediately objected and said they could not agree to that. As the others looked up in confusion, she started to explain that this seemed to be the same kind of arrangement that Tatsuya and Haria had discussed before. The Adamantite King then clarified that most of its adamantite had already been taken, and removing any more would interfere with its ability to continue its daily existence. Tatsuya asked in shock whether the adamantite had already been taken and demanded to know who had done it. The Adamantite King answered that the culprits were the wrong people, hiding in the deepest part of the cave. It explained that the one collecting the special ore was a human alchemist, and that the group behind it was researching alchemy. Realizing the Adamantite King had been harmed, Tatsuya concluded that they would have to take the ore back by force, and the others agreed. The Adamantite King warned them to be careful, saying its defeat as ruler of the mines was the very reason this had happened. It added that the thieves were being escorted by heroes from another world, which immediately alarmed Tatsuya. Hearing that, Tatsuya turned back and asked whether the name it meant was Miyamoto. The Adamantite King confirmed that it had been a young man, and Tatsuya instantly recognized the name with grim surprise. The crystal being then showed them the deepest part of the cave, where a hidden operation had been set up inside a wide underground chamber. Inside, the group saw worn-out workers and armed guards moving through the cavern, making it clear that the ore was being extracted under harsh conditions. As they watched the exhausted workers, one of the girls grimly noted that these were people being worked to death, and another called the whole situation cruel. Deeper inside the hidden base, an older man sat at a table with a hooded figure when he suddenly noticed someone approaching and looked up. The man broke into a broad grin and greeted the newcomer like an old acquaintance, saying it had been a long time. Tatsuya froze in shock, immediately recognizing the man as Miyamoto. Without hesitation, Tatsuya stepped forward with his weapon ready, while the others stayed behind him and watched the confrontation unfold. Miyamoto stared at him in disbelief and asked if he was actually still alive. Tatsuya answered with tense sarcasm, saying he had thought Miyamoto would be off training as a warrior in the imperial capital. Miyamoto brushed it off at once, and Tatsuya could only think in frustration about what kind of people he kept running into. Miyamoto casually explained that the training had been terrible, and that some of the men had been pressured into harsh combat. He added that the whole experience had been a complete mess, and after becoming stronger, he eventually held back to avoid going too far. Miyamoto grinned and bluntly said he hated the idea of working hard, summing up his attitude with a smug laugh. He went on to say that once he had enough power to qualify as a B-rank adventurer, he decided that was good enough for him. Hearing that, Tatsuya looked at him with disgust and thought that Miyamoto was even worse than he had expected. Miyamoto explained that because he was a fugitive, the Adventurers Guild would not hire him, so he ended up in a difficult situation and drifted into the city on his own. Tatsuya reacted in surprise when Miyamoto revealed that this was how he learned about a hidden guild. Miyamoto clarified that this so-called hidden guild was basically a criminal organization. He then said that an older alchemist involved in illegal research had hired him to escort a shipment of special ore. Tatsuya coldly concluded that Miyamoto and the others were criminals, and Miyamoto only laughed at the accusation. Miyamoto suddenly placed a hand against the wall and said he would show Tatsuya what kind of strength really mattered. In the next instant, he struck a nearby guard and sent the man reeling, using the attack to demonstrate his power. Tatsuya and the others stared in shock, their faces going tense as Miyamoto's cruelty became even clearer. Laughing wildly, Miyamoto declared that in this world, money and power were all that mattered. He pointed to the controlling mark and boasted that, even after severe punishment, it would keep the victim obedient and unable to retaliate. Tatsuya trembled with anger, glaring at Miyamoto and cursing him under his breath. Miyamoto smirked and casually suggested that the man had probably suffered a serious injury, clearly enjoying the reaction he caused. While Miyamoto talked about earning more money to expand his influence, Tatsuya lowered his head and decided that someone like him had to be stopped. As Miyamoto bragged that everyone answered his call and that he had never had so much fun, Tatsuya could only think that this man was no longer human. An attendant named Ouroboros introduced herself as the one who managed the master's affairs, and Miyamoto immediately turned his attention to her with a smug grin. He called out to her in a flippant tone, acting as if he could treat the people around him however he pleased. Ouroboros coldly replied that she did not understand what he was implying, but made it clear that he was in no position to look down on her master. Ouroboros dismissed Miyamoto outright, saying he was worthless beyond his farming abilities. Miyamoto laughed arrogantly and boasted that she would be better off siding with a strong man like him instead. He then tried to act friendly and invited her over for coffee, while Tatsuya stood by in disbelief, thinking he had never seen such pathetic behavior. Ouroboros stared at him with open disgust and coldly thought that someone like this was pure scum. Tatsuya immediately tried to calm her down before things went too far, while Miyamoto kept rambling proudly about his past. Even then, Miyamoto kept mocking her and insisted that no respectable person would ever take a man like Tatsuya seriously. As he kept bragging and insulting Tatsuya, Miyamoto moved toward Ouroboros. She reacted at once, and the confrontation only stopped when the group realized what she had caught, and Sonia rushed in asking Tatsuya for the item box. Fury exploded across Ouroboros' face as she prepared to strike him down, forcing Tatsuya to urgently shout for her to stop. The tension broke when the group realized what she had caught, and the others reacted in surprise at the unexpected turn. Sonia rushed in excitedly and called out to Tatsuya, saying she wanted the item box. As everyone stared at what Ouroboros had just apprehended, one of the women looked over in surprise and said that was it. Miyamoto, still completely oblivious to the danger, lit up with admiration and loudly commented on how impressive she looked. While the others watched in disbelief, Ouroboros had already subdued him with ease, leaving him completely unable to act. Even in that state, Miyamoto kept boasting that he was a hero and tried to talk his way out of trouble with money, status, and empty confidence. Sonia immediately saw through his ridiculous stunt and blurted out that she had finally figured out what he was doing. With a cheerful smile, Sonia called him creepy and sent him sprawling before he could keep arguing. He flew across the area and slammed into the rocky wall near the camp, groaning in pain while the others watched. Sonia casually said she had dealt with someone unpleasant and needed to wash up afterward, leaving Tatsuya speechless. A small voice nearby quietly told them not to worry about her as the commotion died down. Then another woman strode up to the battered Miyamoto, hauled him upright by his clothes, and coldly asked whether he had really just insulted her master. The woman confronted Miyamoto again, and after another harsh reprimand, he cried out and was left even more shaken. Tatsuya awkwardly wondered if Sonia had not realized she had hit him too hard. Another woman hauled the injured Miyamoto up by his clothes and coldly asked whether he was about to pass out from Sonia's strike after calling himself the strongest hero. She immediately reprimanded him again and declared that he was nowhere near the strongest at all. As she continued sternly reprimanding him, she warned that insulting her master and Lady Cornelia could have brought serious repercussions. Staring him down, she sharply asked whether he had prepared for the consequences of provoking them. Off to the side, Tatsuya nervously stepped in and politely asked her to forgive him if that had not been done. Still holding Miyamoto in place, she continued scolding him for his insults despite his pleas, leaving him badly shaken. Ignoring his pleas, she said his apology meant nothing and continued reprimanding him, leaving him deeply shaken. She angrily focused on his insults and demanded to know if he was the one who had spoken against her master, warning that he would face the consequences for it. Already bruised, Miyamoto could only stare in fear as another furious strike came at him while the woman condemned him for insulting someone she revered. Sonia struck Miyamoto again, hurling him into the wall and leaving him badly shaken. The strike sent him crashing into the stone wall, leaving him badly shaken from the impact. Tatsuya quickly stepped in and told Ouroboros to stop there, while the others pointed out that continuing would only dirty her hands. Embedded in the shattered wall, Miyamoto weakly gasped that Sonia should have said that earlier. The group calmly discussed turning him over to the city guard, noting that abandoning hero training was likely a serious crime and that he should be brought to justice. Even so, Miyamoto dragged himself forward and muttered in fear that they were monsters, while Tatsuya dryly noted that he still had the strength to run. Through the pain, Miyamoto tried to remember their names and bitterly vowed that once he recovered, he would come back for revenge. The moment he lunged away, a hidden snare went off around him, and he froze with a startled cry as the others watched from a safe distance. One of the girls noted that he had triggered their trap, then called the little bunnies over to help handle the situation. With a bright smile and a thumbs up, the bunny girl said they should make sure Miyamoto could not stir up any more trouble. Watching from the side, the others grimly concluded that Miyamoto was done for and offered him their farewells. Standing in front of the tent, she pointed ahead and coldly sent Miyamoto off for punishment, while Tatsuya awkwardly admitted he saw no reason to intervene anymore and guessed Miyamoto had brought it on himself. Miyamoto then collapsed onto the ground, exhausted after the harsh reprimand. The others covered their faces in exasperation as the bunny girl looked pleased with herself, and one of them dryly called the whole display excessive. As Miyamoto lay exhausted on the ground, several small bunny creatures gathered nearby and began preparing a magical attack. The tiny creatures repeatedly attacked Miyamoto with magic, leaving him incapacitated on the scorched ground. The magical bombardment intensified, and although Miyamoto tried to endure it while defending himself, the repeated attacks eventually left him incapacitated. 20 minutes later, all that could be seen was Miyamoto lying motionless in a charred patch of ground with smoke still rising around him. Tatsuya crouched beside him and cautiously reached out, asking if Miyamoto was still alive. Miyamoto twitched weakly on the ground, and someone remarked in disbelief that he was still hanging on with absurd toughness. A hand set a potion beside the collapsed Miyamoto, but he was told he would have to manage the rest on his own. As things calmed down, one of the women asked Tatsuya what they should do next. Tatsuya decided they would hand the captured group over to the Adventurers Guild, noting that they seemed involved in serious wrongdoing, while one rabbit girl panicked at the thought that even the queen and a demon attendant were among them. Tatsuya then called Katya over, and she stepped forward eagerly as the others watched. He revealed a crate filled with adamantite, presenting the rare metal as the key to what came next. Using the materials immediately, Katya threw herself into construction work, hammer in hand, as the framework of a large new house rose around her. From a distance, Tatsuya watched the building take shape and admitted he was impressed that the house would be finished so soon. The women reacted happily to the news, grateful that they would each finally have private rooms of their own. The new home would also include a butchering shed and a proper kitchen, letting them replace the old leaking shack and prepare a wider variety of meals. As construction continued, they planned practical upgrades for the new home, including an indoor toilet, a well for safe drinking water, and a large shared bath area for everyone. They also decided to rebuild the shrine and turn it into a far more impressive structure, though the god behind it still insisted on only a tiny discount for the next order. One of the women cheerfully suggested they might eventually brew their own alcohol, but Tatsuya said they should not waste resources and needed to focus first on practical facilities everyone could use. He added that, although the project was large, they were also preparing a room in the main house so someone could move in sooner, even if the full construction would still take a long time. Thinking that room might finally give him a quiet place to rest and work, Tatsuya felt relieved at the rare prospect of having some personal space. The women then clarified that the larger room needed sturdy beds for everyone who would be living there together. Tatsuya was confused, but the group answered together as if the housing decision had already been finalized. They explained that the shared room was simply part of a practical housing plan for everyone, and one of the women noted that Tatsuya was part of that plan too. Tatsuya immediately objected, arguing that if they were building separate private rooms, there was no reason to keep relying on one common room. The women looked back at him in silence, while Tatsuya prepared himself for another draining disagreement. The women firmly insisted that even once the private rooms were finished, they still planned to maintain the shared room setup, speaking as if the matter were already decided. Seeing the half-built new house and the tired, hungry group gathered outside, Tatsuya dropped the argument for the moment and started planning dinner. He noticed that everyone had different tastes and dietary limits, and even the small dwarf nearby looked totally drained from hunger. As he looked around, he considered each person's preferences and realized he needed one meal that could work for herbivores, meat eaters, and everyone in between. After a moment of serious thought, Tatsuya reached a conclusion and decided there was only one practical option. He chose chonko nabe, a large shared hot pot that could bring many ingredients together into one hearty meal. The pot was soon loaded with wild boar, garlic, carrots, chives, bean sprouts, Chinese cabbage, mushrooms from the forest of no return, and the soup base, creating a rich, steaming dish. Once everyone started eating, the group lit up with excitement, praising the broth, the vegetables, and the mushrooms, while the dwarf declared it was the best thing she had ever tasted. Stirring the pot, Tatsuya listened as someone happily called the wild boar from the mining caves delicious, while another simply kept repeating how good the meat and carrots were. The praise kept coming, with one calling Tatsuya the best, another asking if he could make curry next time, and another marveling that his cooking was overwhelmingly impressive. As they ate, one of the group excitedly agreed that the wild boar was delicious, praising its rich flavor and how well it worked in the hot pot. Another declared that this was the best hot pot they had ever had, and even joked that a chonkonabe restaurant like this would be a huge success in Japan. Tatsuya explained that hot pot tastes best when many ingredients are cooked together, since the broth draws out each flavor and creates something greater as a whole. Before long, the pot was completely empty, and when Tatsuya noticed that all that remained was the rice he had prepared, he immediately started thinking of the next dish. A bunny-eared member of the group began tossing the rice into the pot, while Tatsuya realized everyone was finally understanding that he was turning the leftovers into porridge. The rice simmered in the remaining broth, bubbling into a large, steaming pot of porridge. Once it was served, the group cheered again, calling the porridge delicious and praising the soup for tasting almost unbelievably good. More compliments followed from every side, with some saying they had never eaten porridge like this before, others marveling that even forest spirits could not make a dish this good, and one asking Tatsuya to make curry rice porridge someday. As the meal wound down, one woman said she would get ready to handle the cleanup, and Tatsuya simply told her to go ahead. Watching everyone enjoy the food so completely, Tatsuya quietly smiled to himself, satisfied that the meal had been a success. Tatsuya turned in surprise when Cornelia approached, and she teasingly asked whether he really would have ignored her if she had not come over. Cornelia shyly said she had been hoping for curry, but then quickly praised how well the demon lord had blended in, and Tatsuya told her he would make curry next time. As night fell, the family meal came to a lively close, with only the demon lord absent from the gathering. The evening cleanup also went smoothly, and Sonia, Maria, and Ouroboros were the obvious ones to take charge of it. The next day, Tatsuya stepped outside, stretched with a weary sigh, and muttered that his back hurt and the sun felt intense. Just then, someone held out a plate of rice balls to him and simply said they were for him. He turned to see Katia, and with his tired face looking especially rough, she bluntly told him he looked half dead. Tatsuya tried one and admitted the rice balls were good, then asked if Katia had made them, and she explained that she had always been interested in rice and had learned how to make them from Arya. After another bite, he nodded and said the salt was especially good. Katia then awkwardly explained that, because of a lodging mix-up, she had ended up in the room next to his the previous night, catching Tatsuya off guard with the sudden clarification. Katia carefully added that she was also interested in making progress with that kind of training, though her wording was clumsy enough to leave Tatsuya confused about what she meant. Before Tatsuya could sort out her meaning, Katia suddenly ran off, leaving him staring after her in surprise. Standing there alone with the plate in his hands, Tatsuya could only mutter that she was a troublesome little brat. Tatsuya then recalled Katia saying she did not mind the sort of growth and progress her mentor was aiming for, which only made the whole exchange more puzzling to him. He gave a tired laugh and firmly told himself there was no way he was going to take that conversation in a strange direction. The scene shifted back to the mansion, showing the large building and the rowdy group inside after all the drinking from the previous gathering. The room was a complete mess, with dishes and bottles scattered everywhere, while several of the others had already collapsed onto the furniture to sleep. Looking worn out, Tatsuya dragged himself along and muttered that he was exhausted from how much they had all drunk. As he looked over the place, he thought that if they did not get a proper brewing set up soon, that stingy god was going to bankrupt them. Still, he reasoned that everyone had drunk enough to sleep until morning, and he admitted it had been a long time since he had gotten a good night of rest on his own. In the quiet room, Tatsuya suddenly noticed Katia beside him and froze in confusion. Startled, he pulled the blanket up and immediately stopped the disruptive late-night prank Katia had begun. Keeping his distance, Tatsuya awkwardly told Katia to return to her own room so there would be no misunderstanding about why she was there. Katia hesitated, flustered and unsure how to explain why she had come in so late. Gathering her courage, Katia said she wanted to continue their earlier argument, which made the tense late-night confrontation even more awkward. Tatsuya panicked and quickly said he understood, but worried she was too overwhelmed to deal with it then, and that pushing the issue would cause serious trouble for everyone. He then nervously added that getting involved would create problems for him from every direction, including possible legal trouble and even issues with his editor. Katia was shaken by his answer and quietly asked whether her age and their complicated situation were the real reasons he refused to continue the matter. After a brief pause, she seemed to come up with another idea and turned back to him with sudden confidence. Katia then revealed that she could use magic to alter her appearance to seem older, leaving Tatsuya completely shocked. Katia explained that dwarf women use magic to adjust their appearance and abilities for demanding blacksmith work, which left Tatsuya even more uncertain. Tatsuya stared in disbelief as he finally understood the practical reason behind what Katia had just explained. Even while trying to stay calm, Tatsuya realized she might be older than he had assumed, which made the misunderstanding even more difficult to sort out. He forced himself to stop overthinking and tried to regain control of the conversation. Tatsuya hurriedly insisted that the issue was not appearance but whether she was legally an adult, since dealing with anyone under 18 would be completely inappropriate. Katia quietly asked how old he thought she was, catching him off guard. Then Katia calmly revealed that she was actually 122 years old, leaving Tatsuya stunned by how much of her background he had misunderstood. Katya, embarrassed but firm, clarified again that she was indeed over 100 years old, insisting that this was simply the truth. Stunned, Tatsuya compared it to Sonia and realized this was the same kind of identity-related age gap complication he had overlooked before. Still reeling from the revelation, he could only mutter that she had completely misled him about who she was. Katya quietly asked whether Tatsuya was going to avoid her now, and he said he did not plan to distance himself. Caught off guard, Tatsuya admitted that learning the truth had not changed his decision to keep treating her the same way. From that day on, Katya started calling him Oni-chan, and she cheerfully pointed out how practical her ability to grow and shrink could be for everyday tasks. Later, Katya excitedly showed Tatsuya and the others around a large room and asked what Oni-chan thought of it. Tatsuya could only stare and remark that it was an unbelievably large room. Thinking back on it, Tatsuya admitted that Katya had done an amazing job, and he gave her brief words of encouragement about the work. Katya became flustered and tried to brush off the praise, clearly unsure how to respond to the compliment. Tatsuya joked that her stubborn reaction was obvious, and Katya remained embarrassed as they continued the conversation. After a long pause, Katya shyly admitted that she did not actually mind that kind of reassurance. Smiling at her answer, Tatsuya asked again, "And what about you, Katya?" Katya explained that each private room would include a large bath, a kitchen, a living room, and more, while noting that a full-scale renovation was about to begin. Looking over the plan, they confirmed it would also include sheds for brewing, farming, and making sake, along with several multi-purpose buildings. As they walked the grounds, Katya added that they would need to dig a waterway from the river to secure a steady water supply. She then pointed out a large excavation site and said they still had a great deal of digging left to do. Next, she mentioned that they would also need to build a furnace, which left Tatsuya blinking in surprise. Katya calmly replied that she had already brought a certain amount of metal materials with her. Hearing that, Tatsuya thought it would be troublesome to keep returning to the dwarf village every time they needed something. Katya agreed that they were planning to build many things for the future, and Tatsuya wondered if it was really necessary to expand the project that far. She answered that it was, because she intended to live there as well and wanted a furnace ready as soon as possible. Tatsuya accepted her reasoning, noting that the furnace could indeed be treated as a later stage part of the overall project. Tatsuya was stunned when he realized Katya was saying she planned to stay there as part of the group working on the project. Katya explained that she was simply a very determined person, and Tatsuya could only give a quiet, uncertain response. She then stated plainly that she genuinely believed in him and wanted to support his work, leaving Tatsuya completely caught off guard. Flustered, Tatsuya thought he was not used to hearing such direct encouragement and could hardly believe it. Katya cheerfully returned to the construction plans, saying that once his private rooms and the well were finished, they could begin building the furnace, while Tatsuya struggled to keep up with her energy. He then reflected on how many people were now gathering around the project, including Sonia, Maria, Ouroboros, and Katya. He realized that the 10 elven workers would also likely be staying there for quite some time. On top of that, Elisa visited at least twice a week, and even the Queen of the Elves came by once a week to spend time at the farm. Faced with the growing number of people and responsibilities, Tatsuya felt like the situation was becoming overwhelming. Still, after taking it all in, he could only wonder what he should do next. Tatsuya let out a tired sigh as he looked over the vineyard and the growing estate. He then noticed Maria nearby in her work clothes and awkwardly admitted that he had simply been watching her. Maria smiled warmly, and Tatsuya honestly told her that her work outfit suited her very well. In his flustered thoughts, he tried to explain to himself that the practical outfit gave her a capable, professional impression. He compared her to an architect sent from the office to inspect a construction site and found that contrast especially striking. Even so, his attention soon returned to the vineyard, which was steadily expanding day by day. When Maria asked about it, Tatsuya explained that they were now making alcohol and selling it, though the business was still only breaking even. He added that he, Sonia, Master Marcus, and a Cyclops had once managed to save a great deal by gathering high-quality materials that the pocket rabbits regularly supplied. But now, with many people living there and constant spending on renovations and additions, most of their money was going right back out. In the end, Tatsuya apologized in despair, saying their banquet expenses had become outrageously high, and Maria could only agree. Tatsuya explained that they mainly earn from alcohol sales to the elven and dwarven villages, since celebrations there happen often and sake is especially popular. He added that canned chuhai also sells well, and with each case costing around 5,000 yen, or 5,000 gold coins, the amount everyone drinks is enormous. With an embarrassed smile, Tatsuya admitted that the heavy ordering was mostly his own fault. Then he looked ahead and said that while they were currently planning to produce wine and sake, they would expand the rice paddies after the vineyard was finished. He explained that since rice is the main ingredient for sake, they had already been growing some, but because the magical cultivation methods needed a lot of water, they were forcing it to grow for now and would need proper waterways in the future. Maria covered her mouth with a laugh and said that with Tatsuya's grapes, the wine would surely turn out excellent, while Tatsuya proudly added that his support skill let him freely adjust the sweetness of all kinds of products. Thinking ahead, Tatsuya said it would be nice to make a juice-like version for people such as Katya, who do not like to drink. He then added that he also planned to make wine vinegar, pointing out that elves and dwarves both drink a great deal. Maria agreed, saying that was basically true, especially among the dwarves, while noting that people like Katya were the exception. Tatsuya concluded that they would make a solid profit just by selling those products and would still have enough left for their own use, then casually invited everyone to enjoy as much as they wanted. Hearing that Lady Cornelia also liked wine, Tatsuya realized where the conversation was heading, while Maria watched his reaction with a small smile. Tatsuya started thinking out loud about food pairings, wondering whether curry would really go well with sake or wine at all. The idea quickly turned practical, and they discussed curry cutlets with egg, more wheat for bread, and the need to expand their wheat fields. Just then, Tatsuya opened the door and was met by an unexpected voice calling out to him. A cheerful rabbit girl rushed over and thanked Tatsuya for all his hard work on the farm. Looking around, Tatsuya noticed the others were missing and asked where all the pocket rabbits had gone, since he had not seen any of them that day. She happily explained that they had all gone out hunting. Tatsuya found that unusual and pointed out that they normally always had at least one chore to do. She then asked whether he had already heard the news from Maria. The rabbit girl brought up his money troubles directly, and Tatsuya admitted that lately he had been wasting quite a lot. The rabbit girl suggested that if they hunted a lot of prey, they could earn plenty of money for Tatsuya. Tatsuya was moved by the girl's kindness and could only thank them for thinking of him. Smiling brightly, she explained that everyone had discussed it together and that she had made the final decision. Tatsuya pointed out that she mostly spent her time eating and sleeping, while she cheerfully insisted she was still helping in her own way. With a strained smile, Tatsuya bluntly said that the pocket rabbits were impressive, but she herself was not, and her over-the-top sincerity only made his complaints sound louder. Looking dejected, she asked if he really was not going to praise her at all. Tatsuya thought that whenever she demanded attention too strongly, she became difficult to handle, while she stood there openly sulking. He admitted that if he left her alone, she would probably lose interest in the issue after a few days and go back to acting normally, but for now he simply tried to calm her down. When Tatsuya gently patted her head, her mood immediately improved and she happily accepted the small bit of encouragement. Just then, Elisa opened the door and apologized for interrupting, then asked Tatsuya if today was the day to come collect the materials, and he answered no. Tatsuya was surprised and grateful to see that she had already gathered the work tools and was discussing setting up a workspace for processing materials. He reacted with surprise and gratitude, realizing she had even prepared the tools for the job. The rabbit girl explained that she was better suited to supporting the group than taking on direct combat roles. Laughing, she told Tatsuya that he had plenty of fighting spirit, while he looked back at her uncertainly. She admitted that, simply put, she did not want to fight and had rarely shown others what she was truly capable of. She bluntly said that survival mattered more than pride, and that if danger appeared, the smartest move was to retreat at once, making her self-interest sound almost humorously honest. Tatsuya then asked why, if that was really how she felt, she had still chosen to stand with them at the elven village instead of fleeing. Embarrassed but smiling, she admitted that her reasons were becoming obvious and said she was acting a lot like her mother, while Tatsuya awkwardly realized she meant she had grown personally attached to the group. She said she did not mind that he understood a side of her. No one else did, then casually asked where she should put the work tools. Tatsuya answered that the butchering shed had not been built yet, so he would find a temporary place for them until Ouroboros returned from doing the laundry by the river. Tatsuya confirmed that he was free both today and tomorrow until around dusk. Hearing that there was no immediate farm work, she quickly decided they should use the next day to take care of errands in town. She suddenly grabbed Tatsuya by the arm and rushed him toward the door, catching him completely off guard with her impatience. With a bright smile, she said they should head into town together, and Tatsuya realized she was treating it as a practical errand run. Still overwhelmed by how sudden it was, Tatsuya let her pull him toward the doorway, while she cheerfully insisted on making up for the earlier trouble by helping out. He thought to himself that buying her a meal and a few needed supplies would be a reasonable way to settle the matter. Tatsuya gave in and told her they could go, and then he noticed Sonia nearby and asked if she wanted to come too. Sonia immediately reminded him that she had work to do, sounding baffled that he would even ask. The invitation shifted the mood completely, and she snapped at him in frustration while Sonia also complained from the side. Left to think it over, Tatsuya had to admit to himself that he had handled the situation badly. As they prepared to go out, Tatsuya realized she needed practical everyday clothes, since she only had a maid outfit and clothes from the demon world, and he also wondered whether Ouroboros should come along. Then he remembered that Ouroboros, Maria, and Katya all had work to do, which made him reflect on how busy everyone around him already was. Even as he hesitated, she grabbed his hand to hurry him along and mockingly challenged whether he could handle going without extra support. Full of relentless energy, she insisted the errand would be fun and boldly called it the start of their trip, leaving Tatsuya flustered as she dragged him onward. The two arrived in town, stepping into a lively street lined with shops and townspeople going about their day. She cheerfully led the way through the market, clearly familiar with the atmosphere, while Tatsuya followed in surprise and tried to keep up. At one stall, she noticed a Morris berry and happily pointed out that it was a rare find. When the seller named the price, Tatsuya was startled by how expensive it was, but he still handed over a few silver coins to buy the rare Morris berry, and she thanked him. After receiving it, Tatsuya accepted the berry with a simple word of thanks, still looking a little unsure about the sudden purchase. Once he tasted it, he admitted that it was actually quite good, saying it reminded him of a mix of an apple and a pear with a pleasant, balanced sweetness. After hearing his opinion, she immediately sensed something was off and asked what was bothering him. Looking uneasy, she admitted that the taste somehow did not seem right to her, even though she thought it should have been good enough. She went on to say that she did not know how to put it into words, only that it was not as good as she remembered. Tatsuya then realized the problem and bluntly concluded that it still was not better than the cherry tomatoes he had grown. He started comparing sweetness in his head and noted that while the local produce was impressive, his cherry tomatoes from the frozen soil were nearly on the level of candy. That thought quickly expanded into ideas for other foods, and he figured that making juice or sweets from melons, pumpkins, potatoes, or watermelon would probably be a huge success. Sitting together with their shopping around them, she looked at him in amazement and said he could even change what people considered good taste. Embarrassed, Tatsuya awkwardly brushed it off and said that farming was the only thing he really had going for him. She brushed aside his modest reply and said that, from what she had seen, he was the most capable and dependable person she knew. Tatsuya gave an awkward laugh and admitted he did not understand why people thought so highly of him, and she fell briefly silent in thought. Thinking back on his question, she said that if he had been older, she likely would have found him too imposing to speak to easily, especially because the highly polished women in his household made that environment seem hard to measure up to. Tatsuya looked confused, and she quickly clarified that her judgment was not based only on his abilities. She explained that, more than anything, she saw Tatsuya as a kind and principled person. She added that even his financial success impressed her, because he earned an exceptional amount without becoming arrogant or causing problems for others. She went on to say that the same was true in his farming, where he kept working to improve crops, expand, and renovate because he wanted to create things that would genuinely help people. After hearing all her praise, Tatsuya could only respond awkwardly that maybe she was right. She smiled and told him that this was a wonderful quality, even if it often put him at the center of everyone's attention. Then, with a calm and thoughtful expression, she admitted that she was probably not the only person who respected Tatsuya. She added that, in many good ways, Tatsuya was different from the people of this world, and that his story of coming from another world made that difference even clearer. Looking off into the distance, she concluded that this was probably the real reason, while Tatsuya sat beside her and quietly wondered if she was right. A sudden voice cut into the confrontation, and the startled beast-eared girl froze when someone demanded to know what the two of them were doing. Flustered, she tried to brush it off, but the other person bluntly pointed out that she had already seized control of the city by force and should stop pretending otherwise. Outside that night, Tatsuya asked why she would not explain herself, but she refused to give him a straight answer. She then changed the subject and asked if he would be staying at the inn that day. When Tatsuya confirmed he would stay, she nervously said they should settle the matter in private later, making the unresolved conflict feel even more strained. Gathering her courage, she quietly told Tatsuya she would support him during his stay, leaving him increasingly uneasy about her blunt way of addressing the issue. Looking at him with nervous uncertainty, she finally asked if he had a problem with her. Tatsuya immediately panicked and blurted out that he did not have any problem with her at all. Embarrassed but relieved, she noted that this was how he always acted, and Tatsuya admitted that he could not deny it. Realizing how determined Elisa was, Tatsuya stopped pressing her for more answers and simply sat with her as the tension faded into a quiet understanding. Tatsuya returned to the house, and the group announced that they were back. Elisa peeked inside and called out to see if anyone was home, while Tatsuya looked around the quiet room in confusion. From inside, someone called Tatsuya's name and casually announced that she was heading to the river to help with the cleanup. Before Tatsuya could stop her, the others hurried out, saying there was urgent cleanup work to do by the river. Left behind, Tatsuya touched his face and realized that even Maria and Sohia had gone with them. Katia noticed his expression and asked what was wrong, saying he looked like he was about to cry. Startled, Tatsuya asked where everyone had gone, but Katia immediately refused to tell him. With a smug shrug, Katia said it was none of his business and that she had no obligation to explain. Tatsuya slumped in frustration, bitterly wondering why they were trying so hard to leave him out. After giving up, he flopped onto the sofa and declared that he was tired and would sleep it off. Outside, the moon hung over the house, and after dozing on the sofa, Tatsuya stirred awake and wondered if he had slept far longer than he meant to. Still half asleep, he noticed a tiny figure calling up to him from below, and his confusion vanished as he focused on the unexpected voice. He hurried toward the entrance as the little caller urged him to come outside, and Tatsuya asked what was going on as he rushed after it. Stepping into the yard, he looked around and realized this was the brewery, still seemingly unfinished inside and out just as it had been before. The next instant, a crowd jumped out and loudly wished Tatsuya a happy birthday, surrounding him with a full surprise celebration. One of the girls stepped forward with a bright smile and explained that today was Tatsuya's birthday, asking if the surprise had worked. Tatsuya was stunned, then admitted he had completely forgotten the date after coming to another world, though he had once discussed how the calendars differed with Maria. Overwhelmed, he broke into tears and realized this was why everyone had been secretly busy since the day before, leaving him apologizing through his emotion. The celebration began with a special carrot cake, and the group proudly announced that the party was officially underway. They also presented teriyaki turkey, modestly explaining that they were not expert cooks but had done their best to prepare Tatsuya's favorite meal. The girls admitted they had been helping and working hard on the brewery interior since yesterday so they could prepare Tatsuya's birthday surprise without him noticing. Fighting back tears, Tatsuya could only stare in disbelief before quietly thanking everyone for the celebration. One of the girls then announced with a smile that they had prepared a present for him as well. Tatsuya awkwardly guessed that, like many birthday parties, this one was going to turn into a big round of drinking. One of the girls explained that they wanted to make the most of the celebration together before their situation became more difficult. The group declared that the real gift was all of them spending the day together, with everyone free to eat and drink as much as they liked until sunrise. As the feast continued, the atmosphere grew rowdy, with food, drinks, and excited chatter pushing the celebration into pure chaos. Even so, Tatsuya admitted that he did not dislike the overwhelming party at all, and so the long birthday celebration carried on late into the night. By the time the moon was high, the party had left everyone completely worn out, with one exhausted girl sprawled outside as the last of the energy finally faded. Outside after the all-night celebration, one exhausted girl collapsed on the ground and admitted she had completely hit her limit. Around the time Volume 3 was being prepared, the artist Atsuyuki appeared with a cheerful greeting and thanked everyone for reading. In a playful editorial skit, the editor-in-chief appeared as a dramatic monster-like figure and warned that the artist might have pushed the jokes a little too far. The preview then raised questions about Volume 4, wondering what awaited Tatsuya, whether restrictions would tighten, and whether Atsuyuki could keep the series going.